Chapter 279. Yi Xian. Needless to say, Yi Xian was dumbfounded at this moment. If it was someone with the same name, then it wasn't impossible. However, this wasn't someone with the same name. Not only did the opposite party come from Qingzhou, he was also the dean of Blue Waves Academy. This was him impersonating him. Yi Xian's expression was incomparably gloomy and cold. He had already smelled a conspiracy. Hearing the words of the red-haired man, Lan Yu's complexion changed greatly. She looked at the red-haired man in horror. You are that Yi Xian wanted by Realm Protection Alliance. The red-haired man grinned. His mouth was full of red teeth. He slowly walked towards Lan Yu. What? Is there a problem? Lan Yu stared at the red-haired man. Yi Xian, my Blue Sword sect doesn't have any grudges with you. Why do you want to make my Blue Sword sect your enemy? The red-haired man smiled evilly. I don't like your Blue Sword sect. Is that okay? Impudent. Lan Yu said angrily. Yi Xian, you are too arrogant. The red-haired man waved his hand at Lan Yu and said with a smile, Yi Xian, am arrogant. If you don't accept it, come and hit me. Lan Yu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Big sister, he said he is Yi Xian and you believe him. I also said I am his father, do you believe me? Lan Yu glared at Yi Xian. Just when she was about to speak, the red-haired man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian like a ghost. He looked at Yi Xian with a sinister smile. You seem very arrogant. Yi Xian tidied up his clothes. Then, he sternly said, I am arrogant. If you don't accept it, come and hit me. The red-haired man grinned. I hope your ability is as tough as your mouth. After speaking, he was about to attack. But at this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Wait. The red-haired man stopped. Do you have any last words? Yi Xian said seriously, What if I really am your father? I say, what if? Everything is possible. The man in red still had a smile on his face, but it was a very cold smile. You successfully angered me, right at this moment, a sword suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. In the next moment, he held the sword with both hands and slashed it down. Boom! As the sword slashed down, the red-robed man in front of Yi Xian suddenly exploded into a mist of blood. On the other hand, Yi Xian's expression was slightly solemn because the man in red had already appeared 30 meters away. However, at this moment, the man in red's expression was slightly unsightly. Obviously, even though that strike from before hadn't killed him, it had still affected him to a certain extent. The red-clothed man glared at Yi Xian, You're playing dirty. Yi Xian ignored the man in red. He turned to Bailey Yun and the other two, The three of you, go back and report. Bailey Yun immediately shook his head. No, how can I leave you here alone? If you want to leave, then we'll leave together. Lan Yu suddenly said, Why are you still being pedantic at a time like this? It's more important to go back and report. As soon as she finished speaking, she shot into the sky on her sword. Right at this moment, the red-clothed man in front of Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and waved it, causing an arrow of blood to tear through the sky. Lan Yu's expression changed drastically, and she immediately slashed down with her sword. However, the arrow of blood pierced through her sword and stabbed her chest. Bang! In an instant, Lan Yu's body exploded apart, but her soul was fine. At this moment, her soul was tightly enveloped by a ball of red light. A trace of surprise flashed through the red-clothed man's eyes. The Soul Guard mirror is a precious treasure, yet it was actually given to a piece of trash like you. What a waste. Lan Yu paid no attention to the red-clothed man, and she just gazed resentfully at Yi Xian. Why didn't you stop him? This chapter isn't finished. Please keep going. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Please, every debt has a debtor. It was he who destroyed your body, so why are you blaming me? Go look for him. Lan Yu stared fixedly at Yi Xian, I won't let you off. As soon as she finished speaking, she was escorted by the ray of red light, and she transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the boundless sky. Yi Xian shook his head. I actually encountered such a weirdo. I'm really unlucky this year. As he spoke, he gazed at Bailey Yun and Gu Yu. Quickly head back and leave this place to me. Both of you'll become burdens to me if you stay here. Bailey Yun and Gu Yu exchanged glances, and then Bailey Yun spoke in a low voice. Brethren, hold on for a while. We'll immediately return to the sect and get someone to rescue you. As soon as he finished speaking, both of them shot into the sky on their swords. The red-clothed man waved his hand again, and then 2 blood-red arrows shot into the sky and chased after Bailey Yun and Gu Yu. However, these 2 blood-red swords had only just flown out when they were slashed into pieces by 2 rays of sword light. Bailey Yun and Gu Yu instantly heaved sighs of relief when they sensed this scene, and then they hurriedly sped up. It wasn't long before they vanished into the boundless sky. The red-clothed man gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. I never expected that I would be so blind. Yi Xian turned to face the red-clothed man. You're not Yi Xian, so why are you pretending to be Yi Xian? Oh. The corners of the red-clothed man's mouth curled up slightly. How do you know that I'm not Yi Xian? Yi Xian spoke seriously. Yi Xian has a dignified appearance, is handsome, elegant, talented, and elegant. Such a person only appears once in 1,000 years. How could he possibly be a repulsive person like you? The red-clothed man was stunned. I've also seen Yi Xian's portrait. Honestly speaking, doesn't your conscience hurt by praising him like that? Yi Xian pointed his sword at the ground. I'm not going to bullshit with you. I'll ask you one last time, why did you pretend to be such an outstanding person and commit such evil deeds? The red-clothed man smiled. I'm not going to tell you. Yi Xian nodded. Then I'll beat you to death. As soon as he spoke, he stomped his right foot. Tenjong kill. The red-clothed man's expression changed drastically as soon as the sword was unleashed. In the next moment, a cloud of blood mist suddenly condensed in front of him, and this cloud of blood mist forcefully blocked Yi Xian's fatal attack. However, this attack caused him to stumble backward. Not only that, but the cloud of blood mist also turned illusory at a speed visible to the naked eye. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and another heaven-level sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, the sword suddenly disappeared. Instant space. The instant the sword disappeared, the blood mist in front of the red-robed man exploded, and a sword was already pressed against the spot between his eyebrows. However, it was blocked by a thin layer of blood armor. Heaven-level armor. Even though it had been blocked, the powerful force contained in the sword had caused the blood armor to cave in deeply. At the same time, the area between the red-clothed man's eyebrows had caved in as well. The red-clothed man frantically retreated in order to reduce the force contained in Yi Xian's sword. However, that force was far too powerful, so powerful that he had no way of removing it. At that moment, the red-clothed man suddenly roared in anger. He stomped his right foot on the ground, causing the entire ground to shake violently. Using the strength of the ground, he forcefully stopped his retreat. However, the blood armor between his eyebrows had already cracked into a spider web. Just as he stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Upon seeing Yi Xian, the red-clothed man hurriedly said, Brother, I am the young sect leader of the Corpse Sect. This time, I am here on behalf of the Realm Protection Alliance to frame Yi Xian. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. The Realm Protection Alliance has entrusted me. At that moment, Yi Xian's sword had already struck out. One strike to determine life and death. This strike directly pierced through the red-clothed man's blood sword and his brain. The red-clothed man's body stiffened as he glared at Yi Xian with hatred. You. I told you everything, but you still tried to kill me. Yi Xian shook his head. You're already an adult. Don't be so naive. If I don't kill you, should I leave you alive to harm me in the future? As he spoke, he swung his sword and the red-clothed man's head flew into the air. Just as the red-clothed man's head flew into the air, a blood-red mark suddenly flew into the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Yi Xian frowned. What's that? Very quickly, Yi Xian understood. This should be a type of mark. It meant that he had killed the red-clothed man, and the power behind the red-clothed man could use this mark to find him. Yi Xian thought for a moment before he activated the World Prison Pagoda. Very quickly, the blood-red mark was forced out of his brain by the World Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian waved his right hand and a ray of sword light enveloped the blood-red mark. Yi Xian kept the mark. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and chuckled. As he looked around, the 20 over corpses did not move at all. Obviously, after the red-clothed man's death, these corpses were now ownerless. Yi Xian hurriedly put away the storage ring of the man in red. He rummaged through it, and very soon, he was overjoyed. This was because he found a cultivation technique called the decaying scripture in the storage ring, and within it, there was a way to control these zombies. Big profit. Yi Xian chuckled. Each of these 22 corpses was at least at the Dharma realm. Moreover, their bodies were special and could not be damaged by ordinary spiritual weapons. If he could control these 20 corpses and continue to train them until they reached the Dharma-controlling realm, they would become a great help to him. Sometimes, a fight depended on the number of people. In addition, this matter also served as a reminder to him. The Realm Protection Alliance had not forgotten him. The other party was still looking for him. Not only were they looking for him, but they were also looking for someone to impersonate him, ruin his reputation, and make him enemies everywhere. The Realm Protection Alliance. Yi Xian smiled coldly. The enmity between him and the Realm Protection Alliance could be said to be irreconcilable. But now, there was still a big gap between his strength and the Realm Protection Alliances, so he could not use force for the time being. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian began to clean up the aftermath because the pale sword sex powerhouses might arrive soon. With a wave of his right hand, the red-clothed man's corpse was divided into more than a dozen pieces, and then he pieced them together into 2 large characters, Yi Xian. After doing all this, he quickly put away the surrounding corpses. Then, he waited for the pale sword sex powerhouses to arrive. After almost a quarter of an hour, 2 sword lights suddenly appeared in the sky. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. They're here. Soon, an old man and a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly saluted, "Greetings, elders." The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. "Are they all dead?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man asked, "Did you do it?" Yi Xian quickly shook his head. No, I didn't do it. It was Yi Xian." After saying that, he pointed to the 2 blood-red characters on the ground. Yi Xian. The middle-aged man and the old man looked at the ground. A moment later, the middle-aged man frowned. He looked at Yi Xian. "It really wasn't you." Yi Xian solemnly said, "I swear, it was really that Yi Xian who did it. If I speak half a word of lies, I may be struck by lightning." End of this chapter. Chapter 280. After they heard Yi Xian, the old man and middle-aged man glanced at each other. In the end, the middle-aged man asked, "Why did Yi Xian appear here?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Elder, I don't know. However, according to my guess, it's very likely to be related to the red-clothed man pretending to be him." The middle-aged man intended to ask something else when the old man said abruptly, "This red-clothed man was able to kill a true defense realm expert, so his strength is obviously extraordinary. On the other hand, you allowed Bailey Yun and the others to leave first and successfully stopped the red-clothed man. Do you have anything to say about this?" Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "Elder, I don't think there's much of a problem if it's just stopping him for a moment, right?" The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Then why didn't you stop the red-clothed man when your senior sister Lan Yu left? Why did you allow him to slash her body into pieces instead?" Yi Xian's heart shook when he heard this. So that's the old man's true objective. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Elder, you have to be honest when you speak. Logically speaking, Lan Yu is the senior sister, so she should have stayed behind to protect the 3 of us. However, not only did she not stay behind after she encountered danger, she actually chose to flee. When he spoke up to hear, he faced the middle-aged man and said, "Elder, do you think senior sister Lan Yu's actions are justified?" The middle-aged man hadn't spoken when the old man spoke abruptly. "I didn't ask you anything else. I only asked you why you didn't stop the red-clothed man and allowed him to slash Lan Yu's body into pieces. Just answer this one point, understand?" His voice was slightly cold. Yi Xian faced the old man and said with a smile, "Elder, I'm very sad that senior sister Lan Yu's body was slashed into pieces as well. But the problem is, I wasn't the one who slashed her body into pieces, so why do you keep holding on to me?" As he spoke, he pointed at the red-clothed man's corpse on the ground. "Look for him, look for him." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You clearly could have stopped him. Yet you didn't. What you're doing is equivalent to harming a fellow disciple, and for harming a fellow disciple, you should be punished by 10,000 swords." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned cold. "First, she's stupid. Before coming to the island, I already warned her that this place is dangerous and that she needs to be careful. Unfortunately, she didn't listen. Second, when faced with danger, as the senior sister, not only did she not choose to take on the responsibility of protecting her fellow disciple, she chose to be the first to escape. This is unjust. Third, she couldn't even withstand a single attack from the man in red. This is weak. I'm very curious, what kind of master would raise such trash?" Speaking up to this point, he pretended to be surprised. "Could it be you, elder? Impudent." The old man's expression instantly turned icy cold. At the same time, he waved his right hand, and a wave of sword energy smashed down towards Yi Xian. The sword stance of a sword immortal. This force swept down like a storm, and the ground where Yi Xian stood was directly cracked by this force. On the other hand, Yi Xian even bent his waist in an instant. Not only did he bend his waist, but he even bent his legs. But it wasn't long before he forcefully stood up again. A trace of surprise flashed in the eyes of the middle-aged man by the old man's side when he witnessed this scene. On the other hand, there was a trace of surprise in the old man's eyes as well. In the next moment, he raised his right hand and suddenly pressed it down, and the pressure from the force instantly rose explosively. Just at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! Along with an explosion, the force directly collapsed, and Yi Xian himself was blasted over 100 meters away. As soon as he stopped, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. In midair, the old man glanced coldly at Yi Xian. "I've underestimated you. You despised an elder and spoke rudely. Today, I'll cripple you to serve as a warning to the entire sect." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pointed with his finger, and a flying sword slashed down. The flying sword was extremely fast like a bolt of lightning. Below. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Xian's expression was rather ferocious, and profound qi surged within his body. He didn't dare hold back at all when facing a sword immortal, and a true Imperial Dharma realm expert at that. If he did, then only death would await him. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Yu Qi. Yu Qi's face was expressionless. She pressed her jade-like fingers together and pointed forward lightly. With this point, a cloud-shaped sword qi suddenly shot out from the tip of her finger. Bang! In midair, the old man's sword was directly blasted away. The old man frowned slightly when he saw Yu Qi. "Junior sister you," at this moment, Yu Qi suddenly took a step forward and formed a sword seal. In the next moment, the clouds in the sky suddenly trembled, and in the blink of an eye, a sword came straight down from the clouds like a bolt of lightning. Seeing this scene, the old man's expression changed slightly. Sword in the cloud. Not daring to be careless, he opened his right hand and a sword quietly hung in the air. In the next moment, the sword turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. In midair, the two swords met. Bang! An ear-piercing sword cry suddenly resounded throughout the sky. Below, Yuqi suddenly leaped, and the moment she leaped, several sword lights quietly gathered around her. Seeing this scene, the old man's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. Shadow sword. Yuqi, are you crazy, you? He didn't dare to continue because Yuqi had already arrived in front of him. Boom boom boom. In midair, the old man repeatedly struck with his sword, but he was also repeatedly retreating. The entire sky was filled with countless sword chi. Not far away, the middle-aged man hurriedly said, "Senior brother Tsang Xian, junior sister Yuqi, please stop." However, Yuqi did not stop. On the contrary, her attacks became even fiercer. On the other hand, Tsang Xian was clearly inferior to Yuqi, and was already retreating step by step. Below, Yi Xian was a little dazzled by the sight. A battle between sword immortals. He had seen the mysterious woman in action before, but her attacks were basically instant kills. There was not much to see at all. But now, the battle between the two sword immortals made him realize just how cool the sword skills of sword immortals were. They were not flashy without substance. At the very least, the sword skills of the two people before him were very practical. Especially Yuqi's, who skillfully executed all kinds of sword skills, making it difficult for Tsang Xian to parry. Just like that, after fighting for an unknown period of time, Tsang Xian suddenly turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. He ran away. In the air, Yuqi stopped. With a turn of her body, she directly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yuqi glanced at Yi Xian. "Go back and cook." With that, she turned around and soared into the sky on her sword, disappearing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Below, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I don't know how to use a sword." At this moment, the middle-aged man not far away suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. Did Yi Xian say anything before he left? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "He said that this matter is most likely the work of the Realm Defense Alliance." Realm Defense Alliance. The middle-aged man's brows deeply furrowed. Evidently, this faction was a headache even for the ancient sword sect. A moment later, the middle-aged man said softly, "This matter is a little complicated, you must not leak it." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. On the spot, Yi Xian speechlessly asked the heavens. "I don't know how to use a sword." If the distance was short, he could naturally fly. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. It was the 10,000 Dharma stage, but if it was too far, flying in the air would tire him to death. But at this moment, he had no other choice. Originally, it would only take 4 hours to reach Azure Sword Sect, but he had spent more than 8 hours. As soon as he returned to Cloudsword Peak, he was brought to Azure Sword Peak by Yuqi. Azure Sword Peak was the head of the 7 peaks, and could be considered the core of Azure Sword Sect. And the peak master of Azure Sword Peak was the sect master of Azure Sword Sect, Chen Beihan. When Yi Xian and Yuqi arrived at the Azure Sword Hall of the Azure Sword Peak, there were already a few people in the hall. Tsang Xian and the middle-aged man from before were present. Apart from them, Bailey Yun, Gu Yu, and Lan Yu, who was already in soul form, were also present. When she saw Yi Xian, Lan Yu's gaze immediately turned venomous. Beside her, Tsang Xian also shot a cold glance at Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian, Yuqi suddenly said, "Don't be afraid, her master can't beat me." Yi Xian. Bailey Yun smiled at Yi Xian as a form of greeting. Gu Yu nodded in agreement. Yi Xian was about to speak when a middle-aged man suddenly walked over from afar. The middle-aged man wore a cloud-white robe with a jade-white lion tied to his waist, and he held a flute in his right hand. Chen Beihan. The sect master of Azure Sword Sect. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned solemn when he saw this person. Because he discovered that this person's aura was actually on par with Supreme Lord Lu. This person was also one of the top experts in the Azure world. Chen Beihan walked to the seats at the top of the stairs and smiled, "Everyone, sit." Everyone in the surroundings bowed successively, and even Yuqi bowed slightly. Everyone sat down, and Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. You're an Yi? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, you are a good candidate. As he spoke, he glanced at the crowd. I already know the whole story. As a senior sister, Lan Yu was obstinate and self-opinionated. She was narrow-minded and did not think twice when faced with trouble. She only ended up like this. Lan Yu's expression immediately turned ugly, but she did not dare to refute and hurriedly knelt down. Disciple knows her mistake. Chen Beihan looked towards Zhang Xian. Teaching disciples is not just about teaching them how to cultivate, but also how to conduct themselves. If young people do not know how to conduct themselves, they will suffer at the very least, or lose their lives. Zhang Xian nodded. Junior brother understands and knows that Lan Yu was wrong. I have troubled senior brother to come out this time to ask senior brother to uphold justice. As he spoke, he looked towards Yi Xian. This person clearly had the ability to stop the man in red, but did not. Instead, he deliberately did nothing to save him. Such a person does not deserve to be a disciple of my Azure Sword sect. Chen Beihan looked towards Yi Xian. You had the ability to stop him, but did not. Why? Yi Xian pondered for a moment before he said, I don't like the sight of her. Everyone else. P.S. Today at the hospital, a man was arguing with a doctor. The reason was that when he was examined, he was not present, so the doctor let the next doctor take over. Then, this man could not take it anymore and started scolding the female doctor in the hospital. He even said that she had accepted a red packet. The female doctor was so angry that she burst into tears. Many a time, people like to bully the weak and fear the strong. If they met someone more ruthless than them, they would be as humble as a sun. It was the new year, and they hoped that the brothers would be amiable. They should not bully others for no reason, but if others bullied them, they should not be afraid. It was not embarrassing if they could not win, but if they did not fight, it was very embarrassing. End of this chapter. Chapter 281. Everyone was taken aback by Yi Xian's words. He didn't like her? Bailey Yun smiled bitterly. Brotherin was an honest person. He didn't even know how to lie at a time like this. On the other hand, Lan Yu's expression was somewhat savage as she glared at Yi Xian. Yu Qi also couldn't help glancing at Yi Xian. Be more tactful. Yi Xian. Zhang Xian suddenly said, Senior brother, you also saw how arrogant and domineering this person is. If such a person stays in the sect, he will definitely cause discord within the sect in the future, and outside the sect, he will very likely cause a great disaster. Senior brother, please punish him severely. Chen Beihan smiled. Don't worry junior brother, everything has a reason. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Tell me, why do you dislike her? Yi Xian shook his head. Even if I tell you, the sect master and some people may not believe me. Let senior brother Bailey and senior sister Gu Yu tell me. Chen Beihan looked at Bailey Yun and Yu Qi. The two hurriedly bowed and recounted everything that had happened on the island. Gradually, Zhang Xian's expression turned rather ugly. He glared at Lan Yu. What a disappointment. Lan Yu lowered her head, not daring to speak. Yu Qi suddenly said, the matter is very clear. He didn't deliberately cause trouble, and the troublemaker has already paid the price. My Cloud's Word Peak will not pursue the matter. Senior brother sect master, I still have matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. After speaking, she glanced at Yi Xian. Go cook. Yi Xian chuckled, turned around, and ran off. Yu Qi shook his head. Slippery fellow. After speaking, she also turned to leave. At this moment, Chen Beihan suddenly said, Junior sister, there are important matters to discuss. Outside the door, Yu Qi did not even turn his head. You decide. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan shook his head with a bitter smile. This junior sister, as he spoke, he looked at Zhang Xian not far away. At the end of the day, the corpse sect is the culprit. As for the corpse sect, although they belong to the demonic path, they have always acted in the dark. This time, they openly attacked our pale sword sect, so there must be someone behind them. Zhang Xian was about to say something when he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at Bailey Yun and the others. Zhang Xian, Gu Yu, and Lan Yu hurriedly left. After the trio left, Zhang Xian asked in a low voice, Realm Defense Alliance? Chen Beihan nodded. There should be no mistake. Zhang Xian frowned. Why are they against us too? To my blue sword sect has no enmity with them. Chen Beihan smiled and said, Who said there's no enmity between us? Zhang Xian shook his head. If they wanted revenge, they wouldn't have waited until now. Chen Beihan nodded. He definitely wouldn't have waited until now. At this point, he exchanged a look with Zhang Xian before he continued, There's something wrong with the island. Let's go check it out. With that, the two of them disappeared. Before long, the two of them arrived at Myriad Island. However, at this moment, the entire island had vanished. Seeing this scene, the two's expressions became a little grave. A short while later, Chen Beihan said, Some powers in the Central Divine Prefecture have been secretly targeting the Realm Defense Alliance. Obviously, the Realm Defense Alliance has definitely done something to make those powers fear it. Especially Yi Xian and the powers standing behind him. His appearance on the island this time might be to disrupt the Realm Protection Alliance's plans. Pass down my order to find Yi Xian. We must get to the bottom of this matter. Zhang Xian nodded. I understand. I'll send someone to search for Yi now. Xian. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. In the air, Chen Beihan slowly closed his eyes. Realm Defense Alliance. I'm afraid that the changes in the Azure world have something to do with you guys. The Azure Sword Sect. After returning to Cloud Sword Peak, Yi Xian immediately began cooking. Half an hour later, he had already prepared a table full of dishes. The dishes looked and smelled delicious. Yu Qi came out when she smelled the aroma. She sat opposite Yi Xian and nodded. Let's eat. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Master, please. Yu Qi didn't stand on ceremony and immediately started eating. After eating half, Yi Xian suddenly said, Master, is the sword manipulation technique difficult? Yu Qi said, Difficult, but not difficult. Yi Xian hurriedly put down his chopsticks. What do you mean? Yu Qi glanced at him. It's not difficult to learn, but it's very difficult to learn it well. Yi Xian asked again, How can I be considered to have learned it well? Yu Qi took a small sip of vegetable soup and then said, You can fight while controlling the sword. Yi Xian was taken aback. Then Bailey Yun and the others can't fight while controlling the sword? Yu Qi shook her head. No. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Master, I want to learn this sword manipulation technique. Yu Qi's chopstick suddenly stopped. She looked at Yi Xian with some surprise. You don't know how to control the sword? Yi Xian nodded. I don't know. Yu Qi shook her head. A sword master who doesn't know how to control the sword, what does it look like? Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something. Later, come to my inner hall to look for a cultivation technique called True Sword Manipulation Technique. This cultivation technique is personally created by me. It's not something that ordinary sword manipulation techniques can compare to. Remember, don't teach it to others. True Sword Manipulation Technique. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Yes, yes. Yu Qi nodded slightly. She pointed to the mushroom stir-fried cabbage in front of her. Not bad. Continue to make this dish tomorrow. Yi Xian, after the meal, Yu Qi left the hall. No one knew where she went. As for Yi Xian, after tidying up, he hurriedly entered the inner hall. The inner hall wasn't big. It was filled with cabinets. On each cabinet, there were many scrolls. Among them were cultivation techniques, martial techniques, and divine arts. All of them. Moreover, the lowest was earth rank. There were even heaven rank scrolls everywhere. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this moment, he realized that this cloudy sword peak was actually the F*King Azure Sword Sect's Martial Technique Library and Cultivation Technique Library. The scrolls in front of him were probably collected by the Azure Sword Sect over the generations. Some of them were created by the seniors of the Azure Sword Sect. Foundation. At this moment, Yi Xian truly understood what a foundation was. This was a foundation. This Azure Sword Sect was indeed a top force in the Azure Firmament world. Without much thought, Yi Xian began to search for the true sword manipulation technique. Soon, he found it. Then, he began to search for Yu Qi's annotations. However, no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find it. After an hour, he still couldn't find it. Therefore, he stopped searching. He was going to ask Yu Qi when he returned. Or rather, he was going to ask Yu Qi directly. Yi Xian carried the true sword manipulation technique out of the hall and went straight to the back mountain. After Yi Xian had left the hall, a woman and a middle-aged man showed up at the entrance of the hall. These two people were Yu Qi and Chen Beihan. The two people looked at Yi Xian, who was running in the distance. Chen Beihan suddenly said, "During this time, he only chose instant space sword?" Yu Qi nodded. Chen Beihan asked again, "He didn't take away any of the cultivation techniques and martial techniques in the hall?" Yu Qi nodded again. Chen Beihan smiled and said, "That's interesting. If it was a rogue cultivator, it would be impossible for him not to be tempted by these things." At this point, he looked at Yu Qi. Did he really cultivate that instant space sword to the extreme in just a few days? Yu Qi said softly, "Everyone has their own secrets. It's enough that he doesn't have any bad intentions towards our sect." Chen Beihan said with a smile, "Although he didn't save Lan Yu on Myriad Island, he saved Bailey Yun and those two little fellows. This proves that he isn't a heartless person. Since junior sister thinks he's not bad, then let him stay here and cultivate. He's indeed a good seedling. If you nurture him well, he will definitely achieve great things in the future." After saying that, he turned and disappeared on the spot. After Chen Beihan left, Yu Qi also turned and left. When she returned to the inner hall, there was a small table in the inner hall. On the small table, there were 3 plates of small fruits. Seeing this small table, Yu Qi said softly, "How thoughtful." Back mountain. Yi Xian held the sword-driving technique in his arms as he dashed madly all the way until he stopped before a pool of water. After he stopped, Yi Xian opened the sword-driving technique. Sword-driving technique relies on the heart and not the form. The heart and soul are united, and man and sword are one. Just like that, Yi Xian read and read for an hour before he stopped, and then he sat cross-legged on the ground and started to analyze it in his mind. Around 2 hours later, he suddenly formed a sword seal, and it wasn't long before a true rank sword suddenly flew out from within him and descended firmly in front of him. Yi Xian pressed his fingers against the sword, and it trembled violently before it emanated a resounding sword howl. Yi Xian was overjoyed when he saw this, and he hurriedly leaped up and descended onto the sword. However, the sword had almost sunk into the ground. Yi Xian hurriedly calmed himself, and the sword gradually started to stabilize. Once it was stable enough, Yi Xian suddenly started to speak softly, "Rise." As soon as he spoke, the sword beneath his feet started to rise slowly. It was slightly slow, but it was constantly rising. 3 m, 6 m, 15 m, 30 m. In just a moment, he was over 100 m above the ground, and he was able to see Cloudsword Hall in the distance. He was excited. Being able to control a sword was undoubtedly the dream of every swordsman. In the sky, Yi Xian's sword control grew higher and higher. However, he was too excited to notice that the sword beneath his feet was trembling. Just like that, after rising over 500 m, the sword beneath Yi Xian's feet suddenly trembled violently, and then it fell swiftly to the ground. "Ah!" Yi Xian's scream instantly resounded from the sky. A few breaths of time later. Bang! The ground beneath him trembled violently, and a huge amount of dust flew into the air. On the ground, Yi Xian rubbed his butt. That really fucking hurts. After resting for a moment, Yi Xian continued. Time passed slowly, and at dawn the next day, a man arrived at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain. The man wore a plain robe and a pair of cloth shoes, and his eyes were dark violet. The man raised his head and glanced at Pale Sword Sect. According to rumor, Pale Sword Sect's younger generation is an outstanding genius. I'm Yi Xian, and I've come to seek guidance. When he spoke up to hear, he paused slightly and continued. To determine who's stronger and who lives and dies. Chapter 282. Yi Xian. The entire Blue Sword Sect was shocked. This second on the wanted list actually came to challenge Blue Sword Sect. Soon, an elder of Blue Sword Sect appeared in front of the linen-clothed man. This elder sized up the linen-clothed man. You are Yi Xian? The linen-clothed man nodded. Azure Province, Yi Xian. The elder looked at Yi Xian for a long time before shaking his head. You don't look like Yi Xian, and it's impossible for you to be Yi Xian. The linen-clothed man was expressionless. I am. The elder said, Yi Xian and the Realm Protecting Alliance have a great enmity. Under normal circumstances, he definitely wouldn't make an enemy out of my Blue Sword Sect. Yi Xian isn't that stupid. The linen-clothed man smiled. Why? Blue Sword Sect doesn't dare to accept my challenge? Or is there no one in the younger generation of Blue Sword Sect? The elder looked at the linen-clothed man, his eyes gradually turning cold. Someone was trying to cause trouble for the Blue Sword Sect. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out from the top of the mountain. If he wants to challenge, then let him challenge. My Blue Sword Sect, be it in the past or now, has never been afraid of trouble. Disciples of the Seven Peaks, who is willing to come out and fight with me? Let me. At this time, a loud shout suddenly rang out from one of the main peaks. Following that, a sword light shot into the sky. But after it reached the sky, this sword light suddenly changed direction and steadily landed in front of the linen-clothed man. The sword light dissipated, revealing a man around 20 years of age. His skin was dark, his eyes sharp, and he held a sheathed sword in his hand. It's a Ray Dao Peak's senior brother Qin Yun. In the surroundings, people exclaimed. Qin Yun bowed to the elder beside him, then turned to look at the linen-clothed man. Make your move. The linen-clothed man said indifferently, if I make my move, you won't have a chance to do so. Qin Yun wasn't angry. It seems like you are very confident in yourself. Then let me experience your strength. As the sound of his voice faded, his left thumb suddenly flickered. Chi! The sword in the scabbard flew out at an incomparably fast speed. The linen-clothed man was expressionless. When the sword arrived in front of him, he didn't dodge, but when the sword was only an inch away from him, he suddenly moved to the side and dodged the sword by a hair's breadth. At the same time, his right hand grabbed Qin Yun's sword. At the sight of this, the Pale Sword Sect's elder's expression instantly changed. Qin Yun's eye, who was about to attack, was also stunned. The man glanced at Qin Yun, and in the next moment, his right foot lightly tapped the ground. Chi! The linen-clothed man appeared in front of Qin Yun like a ghost, causing Qin Yun's expression to change drastically. He was just about to attack when the linen-clothed man's speed was faster than him, and he directly grabbed Qin Yun by the throat. At the same time, the linen-clothed man's right foot kicked Qin Yun's knees twice. With the sound of two bones breaking, Qin Yun knelt down. The surroundings were deathly silent. Utter defeat. The linen-clothed man didn't kill Qin Yun, and he retreated a few meters instead. He glanced indifferently at Qin Yun, who knelt there. Is the younger generation of the Pale Sword Sect filled with trash like this? When he spoke up to hear, he raised his head to look at the other peaks. If so, then all of you can attack me together. Don't waste my, Yi Xian's, time. Attack together. As soon as these words were spoken, it had undoubtedly infuriated all the disciples of the Pale Sword Sect. In next to no time, numerous rays of light shot into the sky from the various peaks, and it wasn't long before a few dozen swordsmen stood before the linen-clothed man. The linen-clothed man had an emotionless expression on his face. "Let's do it together." Meanwhile, a man walked out from the group of swordsmen. "I'll do it." Everyone gazed at the man. The man wore a short shirt and had 2 swords hanging from his waist. "It's the Xianjian Peak's senior brother Gu Lin. I never expected that he would actually come out as well." "What's there to not expect? This Yi Xian humiliated our pale sword sect so much, how could senior brother Gu Lin and the others not come out? I wonder if senior brother Nangong Yen of the Pale Sword Peak is in the sect. There's no need for senior brother Nangong Yen, senior brother Gu Lin is enough." Gu Lin walked in front of Chen Yun and helped him up. Behind him, the disciples of the Pale Sword sect immediately ran over to support Chen Yun. Chen Yun wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Be careful. He's very strong." Gu Lin nodded. He looked at the linen-clothed man. "Rumor has it that Yi Xian is also a swordsman, and also a sword emperor, the youngest sword emperor in our Azure world. However, you don't use a sword." The linen-clothed man said indifferently, "None of you are qualified to make me, Yi Xian, draw my sword." The moment these words were spoken, the disciples of the Pale Sword sect were instantly enraged. Gu Lin glanced at the linen-clothed man. "Please enlighten me." As the sound of his voice faded, he suddenly dashed forward. This dash was as fast as lightning, and a ray of sword light instantly appeared in front of the linen-clothed man. The linen-clothed man's expression was incomparably calm. When the sword was only half an inch away from his forehead, his body suddenly slanted backwards, very easily dodging the sword. At the same time, his right leg suddenly kicked out at Gu Lin's wrist. Pung! Gu Lin's entire arm was directly sent flying, but at this moment, Gu Lin's left hand suddenly pulled out a sword and slashed forward. The linen-clothed man blocked with his fingers, and this finger actually forcefully blocked Gu Lin's sword. At the same time, he dashed forward and suddenly kicked Gu Lin's abdomen with his knee. Pung! Gu Lin's entire body instantly flew tens of feet away. After landing, Gu Lin's body twitched, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Another complete defeat. The scene was incomparably silent. The linen-clothed man clapped his hands, and looked at the elder beside him. "Is there no one else in the Pale Sword sect? Or is it that the Pale Sword sect is full of such trash?" The elder took a deep look at the linen-clothed man, and only now did he realize that his eyes were blind. This linen-clothed man in front of him was not simple. The elder turned to look at the Pale Sword Peak, and after a moment, he nodded slightly, and then turned to look at the linen-clothed man. "Can you wait for an hour?" The linen-clothed man said indifferently, "Sure." The elder turned to look at the Pale Sword sect disciples. "Without my order, no one is allowed to make a move." With that, he soared into the sky on his sword. The linen-clothed man slowly closed his eyes to rest. There were only 3 people in the Azure Sword Hall, Zhang Xian, Chen Beihan, and a Pale Sword sect elder named Li Han, who was in charge of the Pale Sword sect's intelligence. Zhang Xian looked at Li Han. "Did you find out that person's true identity?" Li Han shook his head. "Not a single clue." Zhang Xian's face sank, and he asked again, "What about Yi Xian's whereabouts?" Li Han still shook his head. "After this person left Cold North sect, there was no news of him, as though he had vanished into thin air. Other than that, I received news that the Realm Protection Alliance, Sky Cloud City and several other powerhouses are looking for this person's whereabouts." Zhang Xian frowned. "Even the Realm Protection Alliance has not been able to find him?" Li Han nodded. "This person is very mysterious, and he himself is not simple." Zhang Xian went silent for a moment, and then looked at Chen Beihan. Chen Beihan shook his head. "My Pale Sword sect has been quiet for so many years. Some people really think that we are a soft persimmon, and can be easily bullied." Speaking of this, he looked at Li Han. "How long will that kid Nangong take to return to the sect?" Li Han said in a deep voice, 1 hour, at most 1 hour. Chen Beihan nodded slightly, and as though he thought of something, he said again, "Inform Shang Yu. Ask him to return to the sect immediately." Shang Yu. In the hall, Zhang Xian and Li Han were instantly stunned. Cloudy Sword Peak. At noon, Yi Xian did not continue to practice the imperial sword technique, but made a table full of dishes. Inside the hall, Yi Xian and Yu Qi sat facing each other. Yu Qi was a man of few words, but Yi Xian was very talkative. During the meal, he would try to find all kinds of topics to talk about, and Yu Qi would sometimes reply with a few words, and other times he would just say, "N." When they were about to finish eating, Yu Qi suddenly said, "You seem to have told me before that your name is Yi Xian?" Yi Xian was stunned for a moment, then nodded, "Yes." Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. A person came down from the mountain, claiming to be Yi Xian, saying that he wants to challenge all the younger generation of our Pale Sword sect. Yi Xian. Yi Xian was instantly stunned. Very quickly, Yi Xian's face turned cold. Someone was impersonating him again. Realm Protection Alliance. Even if you used your toes to think, you would know that this was definitely done by the Realm Protection Alliance. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly put down his chopsticks. "Master Yu, I'll go and see who is so arrogant to dare to challenge our Pale Sword sect." With that, he got up and walked out of the hall. Just as Yi Xian walked out of the hall, Yu Qi's voice came from inside the hall, "Don't attack, that person is very strong." Yi Xian did not answer, but ran down the mountain of Pale Sword sect. Inside the hall, Yu Qi said softly, "Yi Xian? Is he very famous?" As she spoke, she continued to eat. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain. At this moment, there were already nearly 200 people gathered there. All of them were Pale Sword sect disciples. Moreover, Yi Xian noticed the man in linen clothes not too far away. Yi Xian was instantly infuriated when he saw the man in linen, so he charged at the man in linen at an extremely fast speed like a ray of light. In an instant, he arrived in front of the man in linen, and then, under the gazes of countless people, he slashed with his sword. A single strike to decide life and death. The strength contained within this strike was like an erupting volcano, and a powerful force instantly swept out. The man in linen clothes instantly opened his eyes when he sensed this energy, and there was a trace of solemnity in his eyes. In the next moment, he moved his right foot lightly to the right and formed a seal with both hands before he suddenly pushed it forward. A strange ripple surged out from his hand seal. Bang! As soon as the two forces collided, they suddenly erupted, and then both of them were pushed back repeatedly by over 100 m. Moreover, the ground before them had been transformed into an enormous pit. It was caused by the two forces from before. Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene, and then countless gazed at Yi Xian. Who's this fellow? Yi Xian had just joined the Pale Sword sect, and coupled with the fact that he was often at Cloudsword Peak and practically never left, practically no disciple of the Pale Sword sect besides Bailey Yun and Guyu recognized him. The man who stood before Yi Xian glanced at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" "I'm your father." Yi Xian suddenly spoke furiously, "What kind of trash is this? How dare you pretend to be me? How dare you cause trouble in my Pale Sword sect? I'll fucking kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at the man with his sword in hand. A disciple of the Pale Sword sect was slightly dumbstruck. This senior brother is so violent. P.S. There are 3 more days until the new year. I've been writing for 4 years without realizing it, and I'm 18 years old this year. Time waits for no man. I hope everyone is well. Chapter 283. At this moment, everyone was staring curiously at Yi Xian. In the distance, when Yi Xian rushed to the man in linen clothes with his sword in hand, he swung his sword down. The man in linen clothes narrowed his eyes and raised his fingers to block Yi Xian's sword. Surprisingly, he managed to block Yi Xian's sword. At the same time, his other hand had already smashed towards Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian had never been afraid of close combat. He immediately tilted his head and dodged the punch. At the same time, he kicked towards the man's abdomen, and the man also kicked out. Bang! With a muffled sound, both of them retreated rapidly. This time, they retreated more than 100 meters. But this time, both of them were equally matched. The man glanced at Yi Xian. I never thought that besides Shangyu, there would be another monster in the Pale Sword sect. He's really hidden well. However, Yi Xian, Yi Xian? Yi Xian suddenly laughed. You say you're Yi Xian? The man said indifferently, is there a problem? Yi Xian smiled. As everyone knows, Yi Xian is the Sword Emperor. Speaking up to here, he pointed at the man. Come, let us see if you're the Sword Emperor. If you are, then you're Yi Xian. If not, then you're an impostor to frame me. The man stared at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. You're not qualified for me to draw my sword. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward. With this step, the ground in front of Yi Xian suddenly cracked, and then a fist mark flashed out. Yi Xian smiled coldly, dashed forward, and slashed down with his sword. Bang! The fist seal shattered with a loud rumble. After shattering the fist mark, Yi Xian grinned. You're too weak. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hands suddenly shot out like a bolt of lightning. The man in linen clothes who stood before Yi Xian took a step forward and pointed his finger forward. The space before him instantly trembled before it rippled like water, and this spatial ripple actually forcefully shattered Yi Xian's sword light and forced Yi Xian's sword to stop moving. The spell defensive state. A wave of exclamations resounded in the surroundings. To be able to use the power of space to this extent, one had to be at least in the Dharma defensive realm. Moreover, he might even be very close to the true defensive Dharma state. In the air, Yi Xian's sword stopped as if it had been frozen by an invisible force. At this moment, Yi Xian made a grabbing motion towards his sword with his right hand. This grabbing motion, kacha. Something seemed to have shattered, and then the sword that was frozen in midair suddenly shot towards the linen-clothed man. The linen-robed man's expression changed slightly when he saw this, and he brought his hands together in front of him. Boom! With this, he directly held Yi Xian's sword in his palm. However, at this moment, a sword silently appeared behind his head. Instant space slash. At this moment, the man in linen clothes was shocked. He stomped his right foot on the ground and disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared, he was already more than 100 feet behind Yi Xian. However, there was a deep sword wound at the back of his head, and blood was flowing out from it. That strike just now had almost taken his life. The linen-clothed man glared at Yi Xian. Who exactly are you? Yi Xian said seriously, since you keep asking, then I won't hide it anymore. Actually, I might be your long-lost father. The others in the surroundings were instantly stunned when they heard this, and then countless roars of laughter resounded like thunder in the surroundings. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the linen-clothed man's expression instantly turned cold. You're a monster, yet you don't know how to respect the strong? Respect? Yi Xian laughed coldly. Why should I respect a lowly person like you who's pretending to be someone else? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly tapped his right foot against the ground, and his figure instantly arrived above the linen-clothed man. At the same time, he held his sword with both hands and swung it down. In Yi Xian's opinion, he didn't dare to expose too much. Regardless of whether it was the sword of earth, his sword intent, or even his sword aura, he didn't dare to expose any of them. Once he did, then it was very likely that his identity would be exposed. A ferocious expression appeared on the linen-clothed man's face when he saw Chen Shi's attack. He suddenly pressed his fingers together and pressed them against his chest. In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from within him, and then he swiftly swung his fist upwards. Bang! The linen-clothed man was instantly blasted over 30 m away. As soon as he stopped moving, Yi Xian appeared in front of him again, and then Yi Xian swung his sword again. Yi Xian's attack was extremely simple, and it couldn't even be considered as a sword technique. However, it was extremely violent and effective. The linen-clothed man's expression changed drastically when he noticed the strength within Yi Xian's attack. He suddenly flashed 30 m back and avoided Yi Xian's attack. At the same time, he suddenly smashed his fist forward. Yi Xian was about to continue attacking when a powerful force suddenly surged out from the space in front of him. Yi Xian hurriedly raised his sword to block it. Bang! A muffled bang resounded as Yi Xian was blasted back repeatedly. But it wasn't long before he stomped his right foot on the ground and instantly stopped moving. Yi Xian shook his slightly numb hand, and then he looked up at the linen-clothed man. Not only was the man before him at the law control realm, he was definitely at the law control realm when he was at the law realm. If he didn't expose his trump cards, then even though he could kill the man with his current strength, it would probably be a fierce battle. The linen-clothed man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a solemn expression in his eyes. After a moment of silence, the linen-clothed man suddenly opened his right hand, and a dark wheel of blades suddenly appeared at the center of his palm. As soon as this wheel of blades appeared, the expressions of all the disciples of the sword sect instantly changed. Because this wheel of blades was a heaven-ranked treasure. A heaven-ranked treasure. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. The linen-clothed man held the wheel of blades in his right hand while he suddenly formed a seal with his left hand. In the next moment, his entire body instantly became illusory. Subsequently, sharp sounds of slicing resounded all around Yi Xian. At the same time, numerous afterimages suddenly appeared around Yi Xian, and all of these afterimages held the wheel of blades in their hands and slashed at Yi Xian. Every single one of them seemed to be fake, yet they seemed to be real at the same time. It was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. An illusion. If it was someone else, then it would definitely be useful. However, Yi Xian didn't have eyes. He'd always been looking at the world with his heart. Under the gazes of everyone present, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed towards the right, and a strand of light flashed on the tip of his sword. Clang! The countless afterimages instantly dispersed, and only Yi Xian and the linen-clothed man remained. At this moment, the wheel of blades that the linen-clothed man slashed at Yi Xian had just been blocked by Yi Xian's sword. However, numerous cracks had appeared on Yi Xian's sword. Obviously, the true rank couldn't compare to the heaven rank. Suddenly, Yi Xian twisted his right hand. Bang! The linen-clothed man retreated by over 30 m, but numerous more cracks had appeared on the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian's expression sank when he sensed the changes in his sword. His expression sank. Under the circumstances that he couldn't expose his strength, he was utterly unable to protect this sword. Because this sword was unable to go against a heaven-rank spirit artifact without the boost of his sword intent. On the other hand, he couldn't withdraw his heaven-rank sword. Because it would be too conspicuous if he did that. When they saw Yi Xian's sword, the expressions of all the disciples of the blue sword sect had turned gloomy. The current situation was slightly disadvantageous to Yi Xian. Right at this moment, the linen-clothed man suddenly tossed the wheel of blades in his hand, and it flew towards the top of Yi Xian's head. In next to no time, countless blades shot out violently from within the wheel of blades and slashed directly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian flashed backwards, and he pressed his sword against the center of his forehead. Under the gazes of countless people, Yi Xian suddenly let go of the sword in his hand. The sword flew out. A resounding sword howl suddenly resounded through the sky. After that, countless illusory swords suddenly appeared in the sky above Yi Xian, and they completely blocked the wheel of blades. The disciples of the blue sword sect in the surroundings were stunned when they witnessed this scene. What sort of sword technique is that? Meanwhile, someone exclaimed with shock. Void Flash. That's Void Flash. It's Void Flash that's cultivated to its limits. When Void Flash was cultivated to its limits, then it actually didn't consist of a single sword but countless swords. Because Void Flash represented speed, and speed meant that numerous swords could be formed. It wasn't possible to cultivate an ordinary sword technique to its limits, but it was extremely difficult to cultivate a heaven-rank sword technique to its limits. On the other hand, if Yi Xian didn't possess the spatial Dao laws, then it would be impossible for him to cultivate swordsman Void Flash to such an extent. At the very least, it would be impossible in a short period of time. The linen-clothed man who stood before Yi Xian had an extremely unsightly expression on his face. He hadn't imagined that his killer move would actually be destroyed by Yi Xian just like that. The linen-clothed man was just about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, Yi Xian had appeared in front of the linen-clothed man. The linen-clothed man had a ferocious expression on his face as he swiftly swung the wheel of blades in his hand. On the other hand, Yi Xian's sword stabbed towards the linen-clothed man's throat. He didn't block it. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Is Yi Xian intending to exchange his life for another's? The linen-clothed man was quite astounded as well. Obviously, he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would be so resolute and actually not choose to block it. What should I do now? In practically an instant, the linen-clothed man had decided. He would exchange his life for another's. Because if he were to make a move now, then he would instantly be in a disadvantageous position and might even be killed. At a moment like this, it was a competition of courage and courage. The one who was afraid of death might be the one to die first. At this moment, time seemed to have frozen here. Everyone stared at the sword and wheel of blades in the distance. Both of them had descended onto Yi Xian and the linen-clothed man at practically the exact same moment. Bang! Hiss! A silhouette flew out in an instant, and this time, he flew a full 1,000 feet away. This figure was exactly Yi Xian, and the linen-clothed man stood on the spot. After a short moment, Yi Xian stood up slowly while blood flowed incessantly from the corner of his mouth. It was like a breached dam. However, he wasn't dead. He forcefully withstood it. In the distance, there was a sword stuck in the man's throat. The man in linen clothes stared at Yi Xian. Why? Why? Yi Xian patted his chest. Soon, a thin armor covered his entire body, including his head. Yi Xian smirked, I have a heavenly armor. Are you angry? Are you angry? Ha. Chapter 284. The man's body twitched when he heard Yi Xian's words, and then he stopped breathing. No one knew if he'd died from serious injuries or from anger. As for the surrounding crowd, after being stunned for a moment, countless Pale Sword sect disciples cheered in unison. Besides excitement, there was also respect when they looked at Yi Xian. This respect wasn't just because of Yi Xian's strength, but also because Yi Xian had stood up at the critical moment and protected the Pale Sword sect's face. And the Pale Sword sect's face was their face. Yi Xian hurriedly walked over to the man and put away the spatial ring and the heaven-rank treasure. After that, he cupped his fists towards the surroundings. Everyone, I still have something to do. See you later. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. Everyone, somewhere else, Zhang Xian and Chen Beihan silently watched Yi Xian from afar. Chen Beihan smiled. How is it? Zhang Xian was silent for a moment, and then he said, he should still be concealing his strength. He hesitated for a moment, and then he said, although he did a meritorious deed this time, his background is still a little mysterious. We still have to pay attention to him. Chen Beihan said softly, do you still have resentment in your heart? Zhang Xian smiled bitterly. Senior brother, am I such a narrow-minded person? I'm indeed angry that Lan Yu suffered such a huge loss this time, but it's not to the extent that I would purposely suppress the disciples of my Pale Sword sect, especially such an outstanding disciple. Chen Beihan nodded slightly. I'm glad that you think that way. Competition is fine in the sect, but it must be healthy. Many ancient clans and sects are destroyed not because of external factors, but because of internal strife. Zhang Xian said seriously, don't worry senior brother, that girl has the intention to repent and will not do anything extreme. As for me, I won't either. Chen Beihan smiled. You don't spoil that girl too much. She's unruly, and if she doesn't suffer a loss, there will be even more trouble in the future. It might not be a bad thing for her if she learns her lesson this time. Zhang Xian nodded. Understood. Chen Beihan turned to look at the cloudsward peak and said softly, "As for this young man's background, don't worry, I already know it." Zhang Xian's expression relaxed slightly. "That's good." Chen Beihan retracted his gaze and said, "The latest news is that the Realm Defense Alliance might be closing their net in the Azure province. If it's slow, it'll take half a month. If it's fast, it'll take 5 days." Zhang Xian said in a low voice, "If Qing Prefecture is gone, will the Realm Defense Alliance's next target be the Divine Central Continent?" Chen Beihan chuckled. "They're already attacking the Central Divine Prefecture." Zhang Xian exclaimed, "How dare they? The few families in the upper realm and the celestial sect of wonders agree?" Chen Beihan smiled. "That's what I want to know as well. I want to see if the Realm Defense Alliance dares to provoke public anger. If they dare, then the sky will really change." Hearing this, the expressions of the two gradually turned grave. Cloud Sword Peak. After returning to the main hall, Yi Xian immediately laid down on the ground. Healing. In the Tsang Sword sect, he certainly did not dare to enter the World Prison Pagoda at will. Therefore, he could only heal outside. In the previous battle, he had been seriously injured because he had held back his strength, especially the last time. Although he had used a heaven-grade armor to block the knife wheel, it did not mean that he was completely unscathed. A heaven-grade armor could not withstand all the power. A large portion of the power had still fallen on him. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Fortunately, it was not fatal, but it was uncomfortable. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian felt much better. At this moment, Yu Qi walked up to him. "The first sword you used earlier was quite strange." "The first sword?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he cursed inwardly. Oh no. He had used the first sword to determine life and death. He had thought that no one would be able to discover it, but Yu Qi had. But this was normal. Given Yu Qi's knowledge and ability, as long as he saw it, he would definitely be able to see how extraordinary this sword was. When she saw Yi Xian remain silent, Yu Qi nodded slightly. "I'm just curious." Yi Xian smiled. "Master Yu, that sword is called Life and Death. It was taught to me by a senior. She said that it wasn't a sword technique, but a form of faith in the sword Tao." Faith in the sword Tao. Yu Qi blinked, and then she fell into deep thought. Around 15 minutes later, she gazed at Yi Xian and said, "What else did that senior say about this sword technique?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "She said that if I draw my sword, then you will live if I want you to live, and you will die if I want you to die. So, it's called life and death." Yu Qi was stunned. After a short moment, she started to pace up and down within the hall. After a long time, she stopped and gazed at Yi Xian with an extremely serious expression. "Is that senior still here?" Yi Xian shook his head. A trace of disappointment flashed through Yu Qi's eyes. She thought for a moment before she gazed at Yi Xian and said, "It's a form of faith in the sword Tao, and in order to attain such faith, simply speaking, a person must read widely before he can write a peerlessly good article. He must possess abundant knowledge and personal experience. Only in this way would he be able to write a peerlessly good article." When she spoke up to hear, she paused slightly and continued, "It's the same for the sword Tao. If you really want to attain the state of life and death with a single strike of the sword, then you must take it step by step. You must create your own sword Tao and possess your own faith in the sword Tao." As she spoke up to hear, her gaze suddenly became slightly complicated. She didn't teach you a sword technique or faith in the sword Tao. Instead, she opened up a path in the sword Tao in your mind. Even if you walk slowly along this path, you won't get lost or stop moving forward. Yi Xian's heart suddenly felt slightly warm when he heard this. A mysterious woman. He didn't know her name or where she came from, but he really liked being with her. To put it simply, it gave him a King sense of security. At this moment, Yu Qi suddenly said, "If the senior you speak of appears in the future, can you introduce him to me if there's a chance?" Yi Xian smiled and said, of course, no problem. Yu Qi nodded slightly. She took out a white jade bottle and placed it in front of Yi Xian. This is a purple source pill. I was going to give it to you just now, but I saw you eat 2 or 3 in one go. Am I too poor? Yi Xian, Yu Qi patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. Since your injuries have healed, then make some food. Remember, it's mushroom stir-fried cabbage. Don't add too much salt. After speaking, she turned around and walked into the inner hall. Yi Xian, a moment later, Yi Xian began to check the storage ring. There were a total of 1 billion supreme-grade spirit stones in the storage ring. When he saw this number, Yi Xian was completely dumbfounded. So rich? In addition to the supreme-grade spirit stones and the heaven-grade saber wheel, there were also some true-grade treasures worth about 200 to 300 million. Right now, he was a supreme-grade treasure. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. There were exactly 2 billion spirit stones. In addition to the supreme-grade spirit stones, there were 2 heaven-grade swords, a heaven-grade armor, a high-grade heaven-grade spear, incineration, and a saber wheel. In addition, there were also over 20 rotten corpses. Of course, there was also the Situ family history and the Patriarch's token. If he used these 2 well, he would have an endless source of wealth. Of course, there was one thing that he couldn't forget, and that was the Realm Defense Alliance. The Realm Defense Alliance had sent people to impersonate him several times to stir up trouble in Blue Sword Sect. It was highly likely that the Realm Defense Alliance had already guessed that he was in Blue Sword Sect, or perhaps they believed him and really felt that the person behind him was the Blue Sword Master. When he thought of this, Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. No matter what, he had to be careful. He had to learn the sword control technique first. As long as he learned it well, it would take him at most a day to return to Azure Prefecture from the Central Divine Prefecture. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and started a fire outside to cook. Around an hour later, Yu Qi smelled the fragrance of the food and came out. Realm Defense Alliance. Within the hall, High Lord Lu sat on a chair with his eyes closed, and his body emanated a faint aura. After an unknown period of time, Mo Xiao walked in. He glanced at High Lord Lu and said in a low voice, "It's been confirmed. Yi Xian is in Blue Sword Sect, and he has changed his name to An Yi." High Lord Lu opened his eyes. That old fellow, Old Chen, knows his identity? Mo Xiao said in a low voice, "I don't know. But according to my guess, he should be able to guess it." When he spoke up to hear, he hesitated for a moment and looked at High Lord Lu. "Why don't we ask Blue Sword Sect for him directly?" High Lord Lu said indifferently, "If we ask directly, they will absolutely not give it to us. Moreover, it will alert them and allow Yi Xian to escape once more." Mo Xiao frowned. "Why not?" High Lord Lu laughed coldly. "It's not like you don't know about the enmity between my Realm Defense Alliance and Blue Sword Sect. Even though 1,000 years have passed, how could the members of my Realm Defense Alliance forget the humiliation we suffered all those years ago? Moreover, the Blue Sword Sect's founding ancestor, the Blue World Sword Master, even said that even if Blue Sword Sect was annihilated, they would never compromise with the Realm Defense Alliance. If I want it openly, then I'll be forcing Blue Sword Sect to go to war with us right now." Mo Xiao's face sank when he heard this. The enmity between the Realm Defense Alliance and Blue Sword Sect was something everyone knew about many years ago. After all, a High Lord of the Realm Defense Alliance had been beaten to death by the Blue World Sword Master. For 1,000 years, both sides had tried their best to coexist peacefully. But if the Realm Defense Alliance asked Blue Sword Sect for Yi Xian, Blue Sword Sect would definitely not give it to them. Not only would they not give it to them, but they would also allow Yi Xian to escape once more. Mo Xiao shook his head. "This matter is a little difficult. The Realm Defense Alliance definitely wasn't afraid of Blue Sword Sect, but Blue Sword Sect wasn't afraid of the Realm Defense Alliance either. If it was during normal times, they would fight. But now that the Realm Defense Alliance wanted to snatch Qingzhou's origin heart, if they started a war with Blue Sword Sect, their plan would be a mess. Blue Sword Sect wasn't like the Cold North Sect, they couldn't just scare them. In the hall, after a moment of silence, High Lord Lu suddenly said, "Let's ignore this Yi Xian for now. Let the Devil's Sect and Ghost Sect speed up." As he said this, he seemed to have thought of something and his eyes narrowed. "No, we can't ignore Yi Xian first. If we let Blue Sword Sect fully nurture him, with this person's talent." As he said this, he suddenly stood up. "Let's get rid of Yi Xian first. P.S. What kind of person am I in your hearts? Please be bold." End of this chapter. Chapter 285. Get rid of Yi Xian. The reason High Lord Lu had suddenly changed his mind was because he'd suddenly thought of something, and it was the speed of Yi Xian's growth. After all, Yi Xian was the Sword Emperor now. If Yi Xian attained the Sword Immortal realm, then it would be extraordinarily difficult for the Realm Defense Alliance to kill him. Moreover, even if they could kill him, they would probably have to pay a huge price. It couldn't be delayed. The longer it was delayed, the bigger the problem would be. When he heard High Lord Lu, Mo Xiao said in a low voice, "How do we kill him?" High Lord Lu fell silent. How to kill him was another problem. At this moment, Yi Xian had already become difficult to kill. Right at this moment, Mo Xiao suddenly said, "I have a plan." High Lord Lu looked at Mo Xiao, and the latter said in a low voice, "How about this?" Around an hour later, Mo Xiao left the audience hall. Pale Sword Sect, Cloudsward Peak. At the peak of the rear mountain, Yi Xian formed a sword seal with his hands, and then a sword suddenly flew out from within his body and fell firmly in front of him. Yi Xian flew onto the sword, and in the next moment, he pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Hiss! The sword shot out violently, and in an instant, it was already 300 m away. 300 m away, Yi Xian suddenly shouted lightly. "Rise!" As soon as his voice resounded. OM. Along with a sword howl, the sword beneath Yi Xian's feet suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky at an extremely swift speed, and it didn't take long for it to arrive in the thick layer of clouds. At this moment, Yi Xian's heartbeat suddenly sped up, and it was truly too exciting. Sword control technique. I've finally learned the sword control technique. In his opinion, he wouldn't need to rely on something like a cloud ship to go anywhere in the future. Yi Xian didn't stop, and he continued cultivating because there were still many aspects of the sword control technique that he hadn't fully grasped. Just as Yu Qi had said, learning the sword control technique was very simple, but it was extremely difficult. Not only did he have to learn, but he also had to learn well. About an hour later, Yi Xian arrived at the top of the mountain. At this time, Yi Xian landed steadily in front of her on his flying sword. Yi Xian grinned, "Master Yu, do you think I'm a genius?" Yu Qi was puzzled. "Why do you ask?" Yi Xian patted his chest. "I only spent less than 2 days to learn the imperial sword technique. Isn't that a genius?" Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian and frowned. 2 days? Back then, I learned it in 1 day. Yi Xian was speechless. However, he still believed in Yu Qi's words. Because during this period of time, he realized that Yu Qi was actually a very honest person. He wouldn't lie. He would say what he said, and he would do what he said. At this time, Yu Qi suddenly said, "I saw your sword control just now, and there are some shortcomings. When you control the sword, you must not be impatient. You are very impatient, and this bad habit needs to be changed." Yi Xian quickly nodded, understood. Yu Qi continued, "The imperial sword technique can borrow the power of the wind. Wind is invisible, but it is powerful. You can make good use of it." In this way, Yu Qi explained some details to Yi Xian and left. After Yu Qi left, Yi Xian began to cultivate again. At this moment, he discovered that the imperial sword technique was actually very complicated. And his purpose in coming to Pale Sword Sect was to learn the imperial sword technique. Naturally, he had to learn it well. Otherwise, wouldn't he have come in vain? Just as Yi Xian was cultivating the imperial sword technique, a middle-aged man suddenly came to Pale Sword Sect. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. This person was the Realm Guard Alliance's High Lord Lu. Chen Beihan personally welcomed him. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan looked at High Lord Lu and smiled. What wind blew Brother Lu here today? High Lord Lu was full of smiles. Brother Chen, to tell you the truth, I came here today because I have a request. Chen Beihan pretended to be unhappy. What request? Brother Lu, if you need anything, just let me know. High Lord Lu smiled. Since Brother Chen says so, then I won't stand on ceremony. I heard that your sect has recruited a new disciple called Yi. Is that right? Yi? Chen Beihan was taken aback, then turned to look at Zhang Xian not far away. Is there? Zhang Xian nodded. Yes. Chen Beihan looked at High Lord Lu, who smiled and said, can you let him come see me? Chen Beihan smiled. Of course, no problem. Not long after, Yi Xian came to the hall. When he saw High Lord Lu, Yi Xian's heart shivered. As expected, the other party had already guessed his identity. Chen Beihan looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Yi, this High Lord Lu wants to see you. Yi Xian turned to High Lord Lu. High Lord Lu, speak quickly, I'm busy. Zhang Xian couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Chen Beihan also shook his head with a smile. Little fellow, you should be more polite. The person in front of you is High Lord Lu of the Realm Defense Alliance. High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian for a moment, and then he smiled. Young friend and is indeed a genius. It's rare for you to have such achievements at such a young age. As he spoke, he smiled. Of course, the prerequisite is that you don't die prematurely. Once you die, no matter how monstrous you are, you will only be a corpse. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere here instantly became slightly tense. Yi Xian smiled. High Lord Lu is right. Over the years, there have indeed been some nobodies that want me dead. For example, a mad dog has been chasing me recently. But I can't help it, I'm lucky I can't die. That old dog is really angry. High Lord Lu's eyes narrowed, and his gaze turned icy cold. At this moment, Chen Beihan suddenly said, how can you speak to High Lord Lu like that? You don't know the rules at all. Leave. Yi Xian cupped his fists together, turned around, and left. After Yi Xian left, Chen Beihan looked at High Lord Lu and said apologetically, Brother Lu, this little fellow doesn't know any better. Please don't be calculative with him. High Lord Lu smiled. Brother Chen, to tell you the truth, I came here today because I have something to trouble you with. Chen Beihan smiled. Brother Lu, please speak your mind. High Lord Lu nodded and smiled. I want to take that young man Yi away. Chen Beihan shook his head decisively. No. High Lord Lu looked Chen Beihan in the eye. Brother Chen, our two sides have been very friendly for 1,000 years. Don't ruin this friendship because of an irrelevant person. Chen Beihan smiled. Brother Lu, what are you saying? My Blue Sword sect has never caused trouble. Of course, we aren't afraid of trouble either. But if you want to bully us, no one in my Blue Sword sect will agree. High Lord Lu looked at Chen Beihan for a long time. In the end, he smiled. Good, very good. Then I ask Brother Chen and the Blue Sword sect to take care. With that, he turned around and left. After High Lord Lu left, the smile on Chen Beihan's face gradually faded. He should be Yi Xian. Zhang Xian suddenly said. Chen Beihan nodded. Zhang Xian said in a low voice, if that's the case, then we have completely offended the Realm Defense Alliance. Chen Beihan looked at Zhang Xian, offended? As he spoke, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. He shook his head and smiled. If it was before, my Blue Sword sect would definitely not interfere in the matter between Yi Xian and the Realm Defense Alliance, but now, Yi Xian is a member of my Blue Sword sect. Do you understand? Zhang Xian frowned. He may not be sincere in joining my Blue Sword sect. Chen Beihan said indifferently, then let him sincerely join my Blue Sword sect. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. This person has reached the Sword Emperor level at such a young age. his talent is definitely not bad. If he sincerely joins my Blue Sword sect, it will be a good thing for my Blue Sword sect. But I'm afraid the Realm Defense Alliance will not let this matter rest. Chen Beihan smiled. Without Yi Xian, they will not let this matter rest either. The ambition of the Realm Defense Alliance is already clear. Once they succeed, the first target will most likely be my Blue Sword sect. As he spoke, he got up and walked outside. You should know that the corpse of one of their supremes is still hanging in front of my Blue Sword sect. Unfortunately, it has already grown weeds. Let's see if we need to clean it up some other day. Also, you should personally make a trip to Jianghu. Inside the hall, Zhang Xian shook his head with a sigh and turned to leave. Night. Cloud Sword Peak, inside the main hall. Yi Xian and Yu Qi were sitting opposite each other, both of them eating. Just as they were about to finish, Yi Xian suddenly said, Master Yu, I might have to leave. Leave. Yu Qi put down his chopsticks and looked at Yi Xian. Leave the Blue Sword sect? Yi Xian nodded. I told you before, my name is Yi Xian, do you still remember? Yu Qi nodded. I remember, but are you very famous? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Actually, this Yu Qi really did not know who Yi Xian was, or in other words, Yu Qi knew very little about the outside world. Because Yu Qi liked to research all day, studying all kinds of mystic techniques and supernatural powers. Apart from that, she was not interested in anything else. At this time, Yu Qi said again, just now, Supremes Lu came, did he come for you? Yi Xian nodded. I am the one ranked second on the Blue World's wanted list. Yu Qi put down his chopsticks. Why are you wanted? Yi Xian smiled. The Realm Protection Alliance wants to destroy Jianghu, and I am from Jianghu, so I brought my group of brothers and had a lot of unpleasant things with them. Then, they put me on the wanted list, wanting to kill me. That's about it. Yu Qi thought for a while, then said, You are not wrong. Yi Xian smiled. Tonight's meal is my last. I will leave later. Yu Qi looked at him. Why do you want to leave? Yi Xian said, If I don't leave, I will implicate the Blue Sword sect. Yu Qi shook his head. No need to leave. The Blue Sword sect is not afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance. Yi Xian wanted to say something else, but Yu Qi suddenly said, The Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protection Alliance have always had enmity. All those years ago, a supremacy of the Realm Protection Alliance died at the hands of the founding ancestor, and his corpse was even at the foot of the mountain. After the founding ancestor left, the Realm Protection Alliance took revenge, and 3 sect masters of our Blue Sword sect died miserably, one of them being senior brother Beihan's father. When she spoke up to hear, she gazed at Yi Xian. All of these enmities are death grudges. It doesn't matter if you join us. As soon as she finished speaking, she stood up and patted Yi Xian lightly on the shoulder. Since you have joined my Blue Sword sect, then do your job well. We will deal with the Realm Protection Alliance. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked into the inner hall. Yi Xian remained silent on the spot for a long time. One day later, 10 coffins suddenly appeared at the foot of the Blue Sword sect mountain, and within these coffins were the corpses of 10 Blue Sword sect disciples. The entire Central Divine Prefecture was shocked. End of this chapter. Chapter 286. Following the appearance of the 10 coffins at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, the atmosphere of the entire Central Plains suddenly became tense. What kind of faction was Pale Sword Sect? 1,000 years ago, it was an existence that suppressed the Realm Defense Alliance. Even now, it was one of the strongest factions in the entire Azure world. But now, someone had placed a coffin at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, and the person lying inside was a disciple of Pale Sword Sect. This method meant that they would not rest until one side was dead. Pale Sword Peak, in the main hall. Chen Beihan's eyes were closed, not saying a word. Below him were Zhang Xian and Yu Qi. After a moment, Chen Beihan suddenly said, Tell the junior brothers to return, also, inform eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Will he return? Zhang Xian smiled. He will, he definitely will. Zhang Xian nodded, then turned and left. After Zhang Xian left, Chen Beihan looked at Yu Qi. What do you think? Yu Qi shook her head. You decide. Saying so, she turned and left. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan shook his head with a smile. Cloud Sword Peak. Yi Xian sat at the entrance of the main hall. He had already heard about what happened in Pale Sword Sect, and now he was waiting for Yu Qi. Soon, Yu Qi appeared at the entrance, glancing at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood up. Master Yu, I have heard about what happened outside, so I have decided to leave and not implicate Pale Sword Sect. Yu Qi shook her head. You cannot leave. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Yu Qi looked at him. If you leave now, the world will think that my Pale Sword Sect is afraid of the Realm Defense Alliance. To my Pale Sword Sect, this is more serious than sect annihilation. Even if you want to leave, you cannot leave now. Moreover, as a disciple of Pale Sword Sect, you should stay and face the sect. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. If I don't leave, the Realm Defense Alliance will not let this matter rest. Yu Qi walked in front of Yi Xian. She lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. With or without you, this battle will be fought. You're just an opportunity to start a war. With that, she entered the inner hall. Yi Xian was silent where he was. At first, he thought that the Realm Defense Alliance was only targeting him, and that was definitely not wrong. But the one who was wrong was the Blue Sword Sect. Maybe the Blue Sword Sect had already been preparing to make a move. Because he was very sure that the Grey Sword Sect would not start a war with the Realm Protection Alliance just for him. Unless he, Yi Xian, was now a sword immortal, so monstrous that the Pale Sword Sect could sacrifice everything to protect him. And the reason why Blue Sword Sect kept him in the sect, was it really because they didn't want outsiders to think that Blue Sword Sect was afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance? There must be some other reason. After a short moment, Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this. Since the Azure Sword Sect wanted him to stay, then he would stay. Cultivate. Yi Xian turned around and walked towards the back of the mountain. For him now, the most important thing was to cultivate and strengthen himself. He was now at the true 10,000 Dharma realm, and he could break through to the Dharma defensive realm. Moreover, in terms of Sword Dao, if there was a chance, he could also improve it. Sword Immortal. Once he became a Sword Immortal, it would be completely different. At that time, he could fight with Supreme Lord Lu. Yi Xian came to the back of the mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. His right palm opened, and a sword quietly appeared. But soon, the sword suddenly disappeared, and in the surrounding space, swords suddenly appeared. It was extremely strange. Instant Space Sword. His current Instant Space Sword could release at least 100 swords in an instant. Moreover, he could appear and disappear unpredictably. Cultivate. Cultivate like crazy. And the next afternoon, there were 10 more coffins in front of the Blue Sword Sect. Inside the coffins, there were still Blue Sword Sect disciples. However, in front of these 10 coffins, there were 10 more corpses. Among them, 2 or 3 were Dharma defensive realm experts. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Besides them, the others were all at the Myriad Dharma realm. And these people weren't from the Blue Sword Sect. They were from the Realm Defense Alliance. After they found out that they were from the Realm Defense Alliance, the entire Central Plains was instantly seething with excitement. The Realm Defense Alliance and Blue Sword Sect were fighting it out. Regardless of the reason, everyone only knew that Dao Yi was a little suspicious, and that meant that things were getting more and more complicated. 5 days later, over 30 coffins had been piled up at the foot of Blue Sword Sect's mountain, but there were dozens of corpses in front of them. Both sides were secretly competing. On this day, a young man suddenly arrived at the foot of Blue Sword Sect's mountain. The young man wore black clothes, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and he wore a pair of linen shoes. The young man glanced at the coffins and corpses on the ground, and then he looked up at the top of the mountain. Blue Sword Sect's younger generation, come at me. Come at me. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire blue sword sect was in an uproar. It didn't take long for countless swordsmen to flash down from the top of the mountain. However, a voice suddenly resounded from the top of the mountain. Stand down. As soon as this voice resounded, a sword suddenly tore through the sky and descended firmly in front of the young man. The young man wore a cloud-colored robe, and he held a sheathed sword in his hand. It's senior brother Nangong. Someone exclaimed with surprise. Amongst the younger generation of the Blue Sword sect, there were two people who were the most outstanding. The first was Jianghu, and the second was Nangong. The world called them the two swords of Blue Mountain. Nangong glanced at the young man and said, "Who are you?" The young man spoke indifferently, "Either you die, or I die. Is there any need to know my name?" As soon as he finished speaking, a spear suddenly appeared in his right hand. In the next moment, he charged forward swiftly, and the spear in his hand was like a dragon emerging from the sea as it headed straight for Nangong. Nangong's face was expressionless. Suddenly, he waved his right hand. In an instant, numerous glowing swords appeared around him. These glowing swords instantly engulfed the spear. At this moment, the figure of a ferocious beast suddenly flashed out from the man's spear. Immediately after, the roar of a wild beast resounded throughout the entire Tsang Mountain. Bang! The countless shadows of swords instantly dispersed, and Nangong himself had already retreated 300 m back. As soon as Nangong stopped moving, he suddenly pressed the sword against the space between his eyebrows, and his left hand's fingers were pressed together horizontally at the tip of the sword. After a moment of silence, he suddenly pointed at the young man, and the sword in his hand shot out like a bolt of lightning. The sword was extremely swift, and it was so swift that one could only see a faint line. The young man in front of Nangong was expressionless. Suddenly, the spear in his hand smashed forward, and the roar of a raging beast resounded from within the spear. Bang! This smash forcefully stopped Nangong's flying sword, and then the young man's right hand suddenly spun once more. Bang! Nangong's flying sword was instantly blasted away. At the same time, the young man with the spear in his hand was like a cheetah as he charged towards Nangong who stood nearby. It was like a bolt of lightning. There was a trace of seriousness in Nangong's eyes. He suddenly formed a sword seal with both hands, and then an illusory sword appeared above his head. In the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with both hands, and the illusory sword instantly slashed down. A heaven-rank sword technique. Meanwhile, the young man suddenly struck with his spear, and his spear was like a thunderclap that traversed the heavens and the earth. Bang! Under the gazes of countless people, Nangong's illusory sword was instantly shattered into pieces, and then Nangong was directly blasted flying. The Spear Emperor. Countless people in the surroundings were stunned. This young man is actually a Spear Emperor? After he blasted Nangong flying with a single strike, the young man didn't stop, and he swiftly tossed the spear in his hand at Nangong. Hiss! The spear was like a bolt of lightning that flew straight towards Nangong. Nangong's pupils constricted. He suddenly pressed his palms together, and then a sword silently condensed between his palms. In the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with both hands. Break! Break! Follow. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword between his hands suddenly slashed down fiercely. Bang! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded, and then a powerful force suddenly erupted in front of Nangong. In an instant, Nangong's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away. Just when he was about to hit the ground, a hand suddenly caught him. Everyone looked at the owner of that hand. Yi Xian. It was Yi Xian. Everyone was instantly stunned when they saw Yi Xian. It's him again. Everyone was definitely familiar with Yi Xian. Because not too long ago, Yi Xian had personally annihilated an expert who'd come to challenge the Firmament Sword sect. Nangong glanced at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian nodded lightly, and then he withdrew a violet source pill for Nangong to consume. I'll do it. Nangong nodded lightly, he's very strong. Be careful. Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked towards the young man in plain clothes. The young man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he gestured with his right hand and the spear flew into his grasp. I thought you wouldn't show yourself. Yi Xian smiled, I'm your target, so how could I possibly not show myself? The young man nodded lightly, come, let me see how strong the youngest sword emperor of our firmament world is. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stomped his spear on the ground. Bang! The entire ground instantly collapsed, and then a powerful force suddenly converged towards him. This force grew stronger and stronger until it was like a storm, and it caused everyone here to feel suffocated. Yi Xian spoke softly, as you wish. As he spoke, he tapped his right foot lightly against the ground, and his figure seemed like a dragonfly that was skimming the surface of water as he leaped up into the air. In the next moment, he'd arrived above the young man's head, and then he slashed his sword down. A single strike to decide life and death. This time, he didn't hold back at all. This attack hadn't just been enhanced by the force of the Sword Emperor, it was even enhanced by the evil intent sword intent. The expressions of everyone here instantly changed as soon as this attack appeared. What sword technique is that? Meanwhile, a wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of the young man's mouth, and then he stabbed his spear upwards, pierced the heavens and the earth. This attack seemed like it could pierce the heavens and the earth, and it was unstoppable. The sword and spear collided under the gazes of countless people. Bang! A world-shaking explosion resounded, and then two figures were blasted flying. However, right at the instant that Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying, he suddenly released his grip. In the next moment, the young man's expression instantly changed drastically, and a sword had pierced through the center of his forehead before he could even react. He'd lost. Countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect cheered when they witnessed this scene. He'd won. He'd won again. When countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect looked at Yi Xian, their gazes were filled with fervor and respect. Respect that came from the bottom of their hearts. After Yi Xian descended to the ground, he wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he looked up into the sky, the Realm Defense Alliance. From this moment onward, I, Yi Xian, will leave the Pale Sword sect. If there's anything, then, right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the peak of the mountain, from this moment onward, and you will be one of the candidates for the next sect master of my Pale Sword sect. Yi Xian was stunned when he heard this. The Pale Sword sect didn't want him to leave. Right at this moment, an icy cold voice suddenly resounded from afar. The Pale Sword sect is harboring a sinner of the firmament world, and the entire world can punish them. Yi Xian raised his middle finger into the sky. Old man Lu, let's fight one-on-one. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Challenging Lord Lu? Right at this moment, Lord Lu suddenly appeared in the sky. He looked down at Yi Xian. Are you sure? He really appeared? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said seriously, you believe that? I'm just playing with you. Everyone was speechless. End of this chapter. Chapter 287. After speaking, Yi Xian turned around and left without the slightest hesitation. Seeing this scene, Lord Lu's expression changed. He glanced coldly at Pale Sword sect, then turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Whereas at the scene, all the Blue Sword sect's disciples' hearts were heavy. Realm Defense Alliance. The influence of this force in Azure World was too great. And now, Pale Sword sect was actually going against Realm Defense Alliance. It would be a lie to say that they weren't worried. However, if they were afraid, they really weren't. Swordsman. A swordsman that could stay in Pale Sword sect wasn't an ordinary swordsman. And swordsmen were usually the most fearless. At this moment, someone suddenly said, Senior brother and Yi seems to be Sword Emperor? As soon as this was said, the hall suddenly became silent. The appearance of Lord Lu had almost made them forget that Yi Xian had displayed the power of Sword Emperor, Cloud Sword Peak, inside the main hall. A middle-aged man stood in front of Yi Xian. The person who came was Pale Sword sect master, Chen Beihan. Chen Beihan smiled, "You want to leave Pale Sword sect?" Yi Xian nodded, "In my opinion, this matter is ultimately my own matter. And I came to Pale Sword sect to learn the Imperial Sword technique. Of course, not only did I learn the Imperial Sword technique, I also learned many other sword techniques." Chen Beihan said, "Do you think that you have implicated Pale Sword sect?" Yi Xian was silent. In fact, now, he suddenly discovered that the matter had become slightly complicated. His intuition told him that Pale Sword sect had other plans. Chen Beihan smiled, "Remember, at this moment, you are an Yi, not Yi Xian. You are a disciple of my Pale Sword sect, not the Dean of Blue Waves Academy." As he spoke, he lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "You can go to the Sword Tomb to take a look, there might be a pleasant surprise." After speaking, he turned around and left the main hall. The Sword Tomb? Yi Xian thought about it and finally decided to take a look. After all, it was free. Before long, Yi Xian arrived at the Azure Sword Sect's Sword Tomb. The Sword Catacomb was located on a lone mountain peak. To be precise, it was located in the belly of the mountain. At the entrance, an old man was lying down with a sword in his arms. The old man was sleeping soundly. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the old man and said, "I came to the Sword Catacomb under the order of the sect master to find a surprise." The old man did not reply. Shrugging his shoulders, Yi Xian walked straight into the building. Sword intent. The moment he walked into the Sword Catacomb, he felt a strong sword essence. It wasn't just one sword essence, but countless sword essences. It was boundless, like a vast ocean. Yi Xian's expression was somewhat solemn as he continued forward. Soon, he discovered many swords. There were many swords stuck in the ground, and the sword intents were emitted from these swords. Many. Very, very many. Moreover, the grade was not low. Among them, heaven-rank swords could be seen everywhere. Foundation. Yi Xian once again witnessed the powerful foundation of these ancient forces. Although he himself was quite rich, compared to these ancient forces, he was simply a beggar. Yi Xian continued forward. Soon, he arrived at the depths of the Sword Catacomb. In the depths of the Sword Catacomb, he found several heaven-rank swords. He also discovered that the higher the grade of the sword, the stronger the sword essence contained in the sword. Come to think of it, these were the remnant sword essences left behind by the owners of these swords when they were alive. Seeing this, Yi Xian suddenly felt a little emotional. If he died one day, he was afraid that only a wisp of his sword essence would be left for future generations to see. Yi Xian shook his head and waved away the negative thoughts in his mind. He continued forward, but after 2 steps, he suddenly froze. What am I looking for? As if thinking of something, he glanced around. There were so many swords containing sword essence. If he were to devour them, the weakest would be at the law-controlling realm. Devour. Yi Xian was a little hesitant. They didn't ask him to devour them. It wasn't a good idea to start devouring like this. But the problem was that they didn't ask him not to devour. Thinking of this, Yi Xian instantly felt relieved. Then, he picked up a sword beside him and stabbed it into his chest. Boom! In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from his body. Not only that, but his evil sword essence also spread out at this moment. How could one sword be enough? So, Yi Xian picked up another sword and stabbed it into his chest. In this way, in a short period of time, Yi Xian had stabbed nearly 30 swords, among which, there was even a heaven-rank sword. Naturally, the noise he made in the Sword Catacomb was not small. Soon, the old man outside was awakened. He hurriedly entered the Sword Catacomb. When he saw Yi Xian, he was stunned. What are you doing? Yi Xian did not answer and continued to devour. The old man's expression changed. He was about to stop him, but he seemed to have thought of something and stopped. If he stopped him at this time, it was very likely that it would cause Yi Xian to bite back. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then his figure shook. He directly went to a Shenzward peak and found the sect master, Chen Beihan. After a moment, Chen Beihan frowned slightly. "He's devouring swords?" The old man nodded. Chen Beihan said in a deep voice, "Let's go and see." After saying that, the two directly disappeared from the hall. After a while, they arrived at the sword catacomb. When they saw Yi Xian pick up a heaven-rank sword and stab it into his chest, the corners of their mouths could not help but twitch. Was this guy crazy? The old man said in a deep voice, "Should we stop him?" Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. His aura is undergoing a qualitative change. He may be about to break through. The old man frowned. Using this method to break through? Chen Beihan took a deep look at Yi Xian. He's a little special. Special. The old man smiled bitterly. It was the first time he had seen someone devour swords to improve themselves. Just like that, after about half an hour, the aura that emanated from Yi Xian's body had become strong to a very terrifying level. This was no longer the aura of a true Dharma realm expert. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly picked up another sword and stabbed it into his chest. Seeing this scene, the old man and Chen Beihan's faces twitched again. Although there were many swords here, they were all accumulated over countless years. Fortunately, after Yi Xian devoured the last sword, he did not take another sword, and the aura that emanated from his body was still slowly strengthening. Just like that, under the gazes of the old man and Chen Beihan, about half an hour later. Boom! A powerful pressure suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Phew! Yi Xian exhaled a mouthful of foul air. Law Manipulation Realm. After devouring 3 heaven-rank swords and countless true-rank swords, he had finally reached the Law Manipulation Realm. Easy. At this moment, Yi Xian felt extremely relaxed. Not only that, he also felt that there was an extremely powerful force within his body. Law Manipulation Realm. Now, his overall strength had at least increased by a lot. And now, he was not afraid of Law Manipulation Realm experts at all. At this moment, he had a kind of invincible belief. I am invincible. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but laugh loudly. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Is there something wrong with your head? Hearing the old man's words, Yi Xian came back to his senses. He looked at the old man and Chen Beihan. He was stunned, and then he hurriedly walked to Chen Beihan and bowed slightly. Greetings, sect leader. Greetings, senior. Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. You devoured the swords? Yi Xian's expression froze, but he quickly returned to normal. In any case, the swords had been devoured. He grinned. Yes, my cultivation technique is special. I need to devour the swords to improve myself. Chen Beihan stared at him. You devoured a lot of swords. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. No, I couldn't control it. At this moment, Chen Beihan suddenly smiled. Don't be nervous, I don't mean to blame you. Law Manipulation Realm. You need to stabilize your realm and familiarize yourself with this realm, understand? Yi Xian quickly nodded. Understood. Chen Beihan nodded slightly, then turned around and left, but after taking 2 steps, he stopped again. I didn't ask you to come here to devour the swords. There are countless remnant sword intents here. If you properly feel their sword intents, you will have many unexpected gains. After that, he walked out of the sword catacomb. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Stop devouring. After that, he turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian also shook his head with a smile. In fact, he had no other choice. If he wanted to prepare his own sword, his current financial resources were not enough. In fact, it was far from enough. For example, if he wanted to reach the true law manipulation realm, he would need at least a heaven-grade sword. A heaven-grade sword was no longer of any use to him now. It was worth mentioning that after devouring so many swords, his Heaven's Thunder sword had reached the heaven-grade upper grade. The sword had risen by a grade, but its power had increased by more than a little. Now, he was completely capable of fighting a true law manipulation realm expert. However, he still wouldn't be careless, because there were strong and weak true law manipulation realm experts, especially people like Wuxia. Although Wuxia was also in the true law manipulation realm, she was still a sword immortal. A true law manipulation realm and a sword immortal were two completely different concepts. A person's strength could not be measured by realm alone. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian continued forward. Along the way, he saw another heaven-grade sword, and it was a very special kind, but he didn't take it. As a person, one shouldn't be too greedy, because those who were too greedy would usually not have a good ending. After walking for an unknown period of time, Yi Xian stopped, because he sensed that the sword intent in this position was the densest. Not far in front of him, there was a long sword stabbed into the ground. The sword was 4 feet long, slender, and shrouded in cold light. The sword exuded an illusory sword intent, which made him feel like he was floating in the clouds. It was a very strange feeling. In addition to this sword intent, there were many other sword intents in the surroundings. These sword intents permeated the surroundings and didn't disperse. Each sword intent represented a swordsman, and also a type of sword Dao. This was because everyone had a different understanding of sword Dao. 1,000 people, 1,000 sword Daos. Inside the sword catacomb, feeling the sword intents around him, Yi Xian gradually entered a meditative state. At this moment, he was feeling the sword Daos of these different swordsmen. Using the sword Daos of others to prove his own sword Dao. P.S. Happy New Year everyone. 3 chapters today. Leave me a Happy New Year too, this request is not too much. Chapter 288. Inside the sword tomb, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, like an old monk in meditation. Outside the sword tomb. The old man was not sleeping, but staring intently at the sword tomb, afraid that Yi Xian would begin to devour swords again. Just like this, time passed bit by bit, until the second day, Yi Xian still did not come out. And at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, there would be a few coffins every day, but in front of the coffins, there would definitely be a few corpses. Pale Sword Sect and Realm Defense Alliance were still competing with each other. However, everyone knew that the real show had yet to begin. Now, it was just the foreplay. On the third day, Wuxia entered the sword tomb. Wuxia walked in front of Yi Xian. She sized up Yi Xian. Do you know what a sword immortal is? Yi Xian shook his head. Wuxia said softly, those who have their own sword Dao can be called a sword immortal. With that, she turned and left. Inside the sword tomb, Yi Xian was stunned for a long time. Finally, he got up and walked towards the sword tomb's exit. After so many days, he had sensed many people's sword intent, but in this cave, there were still very few sword immortals. And a sword immortal's sword intent was very different from an ordinary swordsman's sword intent. The biggest difference was that a sword immortal's sword intent already had their own Dao. What was one's own Dao? It meant that one had a new understanding of the sword Dao, and one had given a new life to the sword. And now, he could not do that. He did not force himself, because this thing could not be forced. A sword immortal, before becoming a sword immortal, had to accumulate over a long period of time. This accumulation was not only about the sword Dao, but also about life. It was not that easy to become a sword immortal. This was the purpose of Wuxia's visit. After Yi Xian left, he went to prepare a meal. Inside the hall, he sat opposite Wuxia. After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Master Yu, in our Pale Sword Sect, who is the best fighter? Wuxia did not even think, eldest senior brother. Yi Xian was a little puzzled, not the sect master? Wuxia shook his head. Eldest senior brother is the best at fighting, sect master is good at management, and sixth senior brother is the most talented and has the greatest potential. What about you? Yi Xian suddenly asked. Wuxia said indifferently, why are you asking this? Yi Xian chuckled, I'm curious. Wuxia shook his head, since you're already a disciple of Blue Sword Sect, there's one thing you need to understand. Within the sect, you can have ambition but you can't be unscrupulous. If you have the strength, you can sit in any position, but if you have any bad ideas, your life will be in danger. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't worry, Master Yu. I don't have any thoughts about the position of Blue Sword sect master." Yu Qi nodded, "I know, but others do." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand. Don't worry, Master Yu. I'm not a person who likes to cause trouble." Yu Qi glanced at him. "You are." Yi Xian. After the meal, Yu Qi walked into the inner hall while Yi Xian left Cloud Sword Peak and came to Weapon Forging Peak. Weapon Forging Peak, as the name suggested, was naturally a place for weapon forging. Any major force would have such a place for weapon forging. Naturally, Blue Sword Sect had one too. And this time, he was here to seek an audience with Weapon Forging Peak's peak master, Zhang Tai. Seeing Yi Xian's arrival, some Weapon Forging Peak disciples hurriedly bowed, "Greetings, senior brethren." Yi Xian also returned the greetings. Soon, under the guidance of a Weapon Forging Peak disciple, he came to a great hall. That disciple cupped his fists towards Yi Xian. "Senior brethren, Master is currently forging, please wait for a moment." Yi Xian nodded, "All right. Junior brother, go ahead. I'll wait here alone." That person nodded his head. "Senior brother, if you need anything, just let me know." With that, he turned and left. Yi Xian sat on the chair and waited. About 2 hours later, a burly middle-aged man appeared in the great hall. The middle-aged man was extremely burly, especially his arms, which were like two huge pillars, filled with explosive power. Zhang Tai. This person in front of him was the Weapon Forging Peak's peak master. Zhang Tai took a look at Yi Xian. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian hurriedly stood up and bowed, "Uncle Master Zhang, I'm here to ask Uncle Master to help me forge a heaven-grade sword case." Sword case. He also had a sword case, but it was only at true grade and could not keep up with his current strength. He needed a heaven-grade sword case. Zhang Tai walked in front of Yi Xian. "Do you know what a heaven-grade sword case means?" Yi Xian shook his head, "I don't." Zhang Tai replied calmly, "At least 5 billion high-grade spirit stones, and this is only the cost of materials, manpower and earth vein fees. Adding everything up, to forge a heaven-grade spiritual relic, it would need at least 10 billion high-grade spirit stones. Moreover, high-grade spirit stones might not be of use. What we need are amethyst source crystals. A large amount of amethyst source crystals." Speaking of this, he stretched out his hand towards Yi Xian. "Do you have it? 10 billion high-grade spirit stones." Yi Xian shook his head repeatedly, "No, no." Zhang Tai took a look at Yi Xian. "If you don't have money, what are you talking about?" Saying that, he turned around and was about to leave, but very quickly, he stopped and turned back to look at Yi Xian. "If you help me with something, I can forge a true grade sword case for you for free." "What is it?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Zhang Tai replied calmly, "In Sky Cloud City's City Lord's house, there's a recovered treasure named Thousand Weapon Cauldron. This is a top-grade heaven-grade treasure, specially used to forge spiritual relic. If you can retrieve this item, I can forge a sword case for you for free. Not only that, I can also forge a flying sword for you, a flying sword specially used for the sword case." Sky Cloud City. Yi Xian thought for a moment. Sure. Sky Cloud City. He had not forgotten about this city. This city's city lord Lu Feng and his son had once gone against Yi Ling. Zhang Tai replied calmly, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. Sky Cloud City is filled with crouching tigers and dragons. This time, you might not be able to get out." Saying that, he turned around and left the main hall. As for Yi Xian, he also turned around and left. He directly left Firmament Sword Sect and headed straight towards Sky Cloud City. Of course, it was done secretly. He didn't want to attract too much attention now. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived at Sky Cloud City. Sky Cloud City could be said to be the Realm Defense Alliance's turf. This city would bring in huge profits to the Realm Defense Alliance every year. And in this city, there were other powerhouses, but they had to depend on the Realm Defense Alliance to make a living. Yi Xian made use of his chaotic qi to sneak into Sky Cloud City and arrived at the city lord's residence. At this moment, the city lord's residence was still heavily guarded. Occasionally, there would be strong practitioners sweeping through every corner with their divine senses. However, these divine senses were totally unable to discover his chaotic qi. Approximately 1 hour later, Yi Xian left the city lord's residence. In a corner outside the city lord's residence, Yi Xian's expression was gloomy because he had searched the entire residence but there was no clue at all. Only then did he realize that Lu Feng must have been carrying such a supreme treasure on him. In order to obtain that 1,000-weapon cauldron, he must first get rid of Lu Feng. And this Lu Feng was in the true 10,000 Laws realm. Assassination. These two words appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Without the slightest hesitation, he decisively chose assassination. Very quickly, Yi Xian sneaked into the city lord's residence again. Not long later, he found Lu Feng's residence but there was no one inside. In the corner of the room, Yi Xian surveyed his surroundings. He was standing right in front of the door. As long as Lu Feng opened the door, he would be face to face with him. His right hand gripped tightly onto his sword. He didn't dare to release his sword intent and force, but he had to release all his sword intent and force the moment he made his move. He couldn't afford to be any slower. He had to kill him in one strike. Otherwise, he would be surrounded and attacked. In this city lord's residence, there were at least 3 true 10,000 Laws realm practitioners. Once he was surrounded, it would be difficult for him to escape. Wait. What he had to do now was to wait. Just like that, Yi Xian didn't move at all and stood behind the door like a statue. A night passed and Lu Feng still hadn't returned. On the other hand, Yi Xian was still standing there. On the second night, Lu Feng still didn't return and Yi Xian didn't leave either. He continued to wait there. On the third day, on the fourth day, just like that, on the fifth day, footsteps suddenly sounded from outside the door. Yi Xian still didn't move. The footsteps got closer and closer. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly felt his heartbeat quicken. Soon, the footsteps reached the door. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the door. "Who are you? Why are you in my room?" Hearing this, Yi Xian's mind instantly went blank. I was discovered? How could I be discovered? In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Yi Xian's mind. Soon, Yi Xian forced himself to calm down. Impossible. There was no way that Lu Feng could have discovered him. At this moment, the door suddenly opened. The person standing in front of the door was Lu Feng. Lu Feng stepped into the room, but in the next moment, as if he had sensed something, Lu Feng's expression changed drastically. He was about to pull back his foot when a sword suddenly slashed down from above his head. This sword had appeared without any warning. One sword to decide life and death. The moment Lu Feng stepped into the room, Yi Xian immediately executed one sword to decide life and death. At the same time, he released all of his sword qi and sword intent. To Lu Feng, this sword strike was too sudden and too terrifying. At this moment of life and death, Lu Feng instinctively raised his arms to block. The sword fell. Qi. Lu Feng's arms were instantly severed. As the sword fell, Lu Feng frantically retreated. However, it was his soul that was retreating, not his physical body. Qi. Yi Xian's sword slashed down, shattering Lu Feng's physical body in an instant. However, Lu Feng's soul retreated 10 zhang, dodging this fatal strike. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward and stabbed out with his sword. One sword to fix the soul. This sword strike was specifically aimed at the soul. After losing his physical body, Lu Feng's strength had been greatly reduced. How could the current him block Yi Xian's sword strike that was specifically aimed at the soul? Sensing the terrifying power of this sword strike, Lu Feng was horrified. He instinctively wanted to flee, but Yi Xian's sword was faster. Chi! A sword pierced through Lu Feng's forehead, and Lu Feng's body immediately turned illusory. Yi Xian stopped. With a wave of his right hand, Lu Feng's storage ring flew into his hand. In the next instant, he disappeared from the spot like a ghost. At the moment he vanished, two old men suddenly appeared here. True Imperial Magic Realm cultivators. When they saw Lu Feng's shattered corpse on the ground, the two old men exchanged a glance. Then, their faces turned deathly pale. Chapter 289. Cold Sweat. Both of their foreheads were already dripping with cold sweat. Because they had just heard a sword chime, but when they arrived, Lu Feng was already dead. And they had only heard the sword chime less than half a breath of time. Someone had killed Lu Feng in half a breath of time. Who killed Lu Feng? A sword chime. Without a doubt, it had to be the Blue Sword Sect. The two elders hurriedly turned and left. Outside the city, Yi Xian arrived at a deserted place. After stopping, Yi Xian's face was full of excitement. Instant kill. He had just killed a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator. That was an instant kill. Before this, he had never imagined that he could kill a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator in an instant. Never. In the past, whenever he saw a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator, he would turn and run. But just now, he, Yi Xian, had killed a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator with 2 strikes. It would be a lie to say that he was not excited. However, after the excitement, he had to calm down. He had assassinated a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator, not an instant kill. Thinking of this, the smile on Yi Xian's face slowly faded. If it was a head-on duel, he would definitely not be able to kill a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator so easily. Moreover, whether or not they could win was still a problem. A huge problem. After a moment, Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this problem. In any case, he was no longer afraid of a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator. Yi Xian hurriedly took out the storage ring. When he saw what was inside, Yi Xian was completely stunned. His hands were trembling. Because inside the storage ring, there were almost 5 billion supreme-grade spirit stones. Apart from that, there was also a heaven-grade spirit weapon. It was a saber. The saber was about 4 feet long, slightly curved, and exuded a dark green glow. On the edge of the saber, there was a faint red glow. On the hilt of the saber, there were 2 conspicuous black words, Heaven Splitter. A heaven-grade treasure. Yi Xian grinned. This was a good saber. It was a pity that he did not use it. However, he could sell it or give it away in the future. After putting away the Heaven Splitter, Yi Xian continued to look through the storage ring. In addition to the heaven-grade saber, there were more than 1,000 purple origin crystals in the storage ring. Purple Genesis crystals and top-grade spirit stones could not be exchanged for each other because purple Genesis crystals were too rare. Under normal circumstances, no one would be willing to exchange their purple Genesis crystals for top-grade spirit stones. Even those with top-grade spirit stones would not be willing to exchange them for purple Genesis crystals because the ratio would be too high if they were to exchange them for one. It was not worth it all. Therefore, in the Azure world, the common currency for ordinary cultivators was the Spirit Stone, and for those who had reached the Imperial Law Realm and the true Imperial Law Realm, the common currency was the Purple Source Crystal. If 1,000 purple origin crystals were to be exchanged for top-grade Spirit Stones, it wouldn't be a problem to exchange for 5 billion top-grade Spirit Stones. However, Yi Xian did not plan to exchange them because purple origin crystals were exactly what he needed right now. After putting away the purple origin crystals, Yi Xian continued to look through the storage ring. In addition to the purple origin crystals, there were more than 100 treasures in the storage ring. They were all immortal herbs and spirit pills that were incomparably precious. In short, there was basically no trash in the storage ring. What a steal! Yi Xian was so excited that he jumped up and down. However, this was normal. Lu Feng was a city lord after all. His net worth was definitely not low. The only pity was that there was no 1,000-tool cauldron in the storage ring. There was no 1,000-tool cauldron. Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that War Iron's information was wrong? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian finally decided to make another trip to the city. If he had a heaven-grade sword case, his battle strength would definitely increase greatly. Flying swords were also his forte. But now, he lacked a good sword case. After Yi Xian stealthily entered the city, he once again snuck into the city lord's mansion. At this moment, the city lord's mansion was in a state of panic and chaos. The city lord had been silently killed. Who wouldn't be panicking? Although Lu Feng was dead, he still had a wife and son. At this moment, the person presiding over Lu Feng's funeral was his second son, Lu Qiao. In front of the mourning hall, Lu Qiao silently knelt, his thoughts unknown. At this moment, several people suddenly appeared in the mourning hall. The people who came were Mo Xiu of the Realm Defense Alliance. Mo Xiu walked to the front of the mourning hall. He glanced at the coffin and frowned deeply. Instantly killing a true defensive magic realm expert. Could it be that the eldest senior brother of the Pale Sword sect has returned? Thinking of this, Mo Xiu's pupils suddenly shrank. In the next moment, he directly turned around and left. Soon, several people disappeared from the mourning hall. They left as quickly as they came. After Mo Xiu and the others left, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Lu Qiao. However, at this moment, he was wearing a gray robe, and his true appearance could not be seen. Seeing Yi Xian appear, Lu Qiao glanced at him, his face expressionless. Yi Xian was somewhat surprised. This person was quite calm. After a moment, Lu Qiao suddenly spoke, "Who else do you want to kill?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "The myriad tool cauldron. I need this thing. Give it to me and I will leave." "What if I don't?" Lu Qiao asked. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Chi! One of Lu Qiao's arms directly flew off. Yi Xian grinned, "I like tough bones like you. I will ask you one last time, will you give it to me or not? Believe me, if your answer is not good, these will be your last words in this life." Lu Qiao stared at Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, he suddenly said, in the cabinet." Yi Xian suddenly slashed down again. Chi! Another of Lu Qiao's arms flew off. Lu Qiao stared at Yi Xian, "How do you know I'm lying?" Yi Xian was taken aback. Then he asked, "Are you lying?" "I don't know. I just casually slashed." Hearing this, Lu Qiao's expression instantly became ferocious. Yi Xian grinned, "Do you want to live? If you do, then hand it over." Lu Qiao sneered, "Even if I tell you, you won't let me live." Yi Xian suddenly said, "It's on you." Hearing this, Lu Qiao was stunned. The next moment, he hurriedly said, "How could I keep such a divine item on me?" Yi Xian smiled, "Because it's a precious item, you will definitely keep it on you." Ah! Lu Qiao suddenly roared, then a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Bang! As soon as the sword descended, Lu Qiao's aura instantly vanished without a trace. At the same time, Lu Qiao's body was directly split into two. Blood and internal organs sprayed all over the ground. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and Lu Qiao's spatial ring instantly flew into his palm. He glanced at it, and there was an enormous cauldron over 6 m tall within the spatial ring. The myriad tool cauldron. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away and was about to leave. Right at this moment, Mo Xiu who'd left earlier had suddenly appeared in front of him, and there were 4 true defense realm experts standing behind Mo Xiu. He'd left and returned. Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian, "May I know which peak master of the Pale Sword sect you are?" Yi Xian sneered, "What? You want to take revenge on me? Mo Xiao said indifferently, reveal your true form. Right at this moment, the aura emanating from Yi Xian's body suddenly vanished without a trace. The expressions of Mo Xiao and the others instantly changed. Because Yi Xian was still standing in front of them, but they could no longer sense Yi Xian. Mo Xiao stared fixedly at Yi Xian. It's you. Yi Xian slowly walked over to Mo Xiao. You never know how weak you are. As he finished speaking, he walked around Mo Xiao and walked towards the outside. Within the hall, Mo Xiao's expression changed. Suddenly, he fiercely turned around. Since your excellency is so formidable, then please enlighten me. Yi Xian's footsteps stopped. He slightly paused, and then said, do you know why it's so difficult for you to advance even half an inch after you've reached the true defense realm? Mo Xiao, who was about to attack, hesitated for a moment, and then said, why? Yi Xian said in a light voice, because there's already a demon barrier in your heart. Mo Xiao was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, shut up, when this lord is speaking, don't interrupt, understand? Mo Xiao glanced at Yi Xian, but didn't speak. Obviously, the temptation of breaking through to the true defense realm was too great. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, and then said, actually, there's no other reason, it's mainly because you're stupid. Besides this, I really can't think of any other reason. As he finished speaking, Yi Xian broke into a run. Mo Xiao. Chapter 290. He ran away. Mo Xiao and the others stood dumbfounded on the spot. He actually ran away. They really didn't expect that Yi Xian would run away, because Yi Xian's appearance showed that he was a peerless expert. How could such a peerless expert run away? But the problem was, he really did run away. Mo Xiao and the others were stunned for almost 2 breaths of time. Then, Mo Xiao's expression turned extremely ugly. Chase. Soon, they disappeared on the spot. At this moment, he had already understood something. It was very likely that this peerless powerhouse from before was a wax man with a silver spear. I've been cheated. Thinking of this, Mo Xiao's complexion became even more unsightly. After living for so many years, he was actually toyed with like this. This was simply the greatest humiliation in one's life. In next to no time, Mo Xiao and the others chased out of the Castellan's estate and arrived on the streets. However, when they arrived on the streets, their expressions instantly became slightly unsightly. Aura. When they chased someone, they relied on locking onto their aura. However, they were unable to lock onto Yi Xian at all. Therefore, after leaving the city lord's mansion and entering the vast crowd, they completely lost track of Yi Xian. If he wanted to catch up to Yi Xian, he had to keep his eyes on him. At the entrance of the city lord's mansion, Mo Xiao used his spiritual sense to sweep the surroundings. However, there was nothing. Gradually, his complexion became somewhat fierce. Since the other party fled, it meant that he was afraid. Fear proved that he wasn't the sword master of Zhangjie. If that wasn't the sword master of the Azure rank, then who could it be? How did he manage to conceal his aura? At the entrance of the city lord mansion, Mo Xiao had a gloomy face as he thought for a long time. Finally, he swept his eyes around once more. Let's go. After saying that, they disappeared on the spot. About a quarter of an hour after they disappeared, a man walked out from behind the gates of the city lord mansion. It was Yi Xian. In fact, he didn't even try to escape just now. He did not dare to escape. Because once he left the city, he would be too conspicuous if he fled, and Mo Xiao and the others would definitely be able to notice him. Therefore, he decisively chose not to run, and stayed right in front of Mo Xiao and the others. Chaos Qi. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the Chaos Qi. This Chaos Qi was simply too terrifying. The effects of the chaotic Qi were definitely not limited to this. They would slowly develop it in the future. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it as his figure shuddered and he left the city lord's residence. He didn't stay in Sky Cloud City but returned to Blue Sword Sect. Weapon Forging Peak. Zhang Tai stared at the multitude tool cauldron for a long time. Finally, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "You killed him." Yi Xian nodded. "Kill them." Zhang Tai nodded slightly. "Follow me." After saying that, he walked out. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Heaven-ranked sword case. Just thinking about it made him excited. Before long, Zhang Tai brought Yi Xian to the belly of Weapon Forging Peak. At this moment, Yi Xian realized that the entire Weapon Forging Peak was empty. And in the belly of the mountain, Yi Xian discovered many Weapon Forging Peak disciples. These disciples were forging weapons. When they saw Zhang Tai, these disciples bowed and sized up Yi Xian curiously. Zhang Tai brought Yi Xian deep into the belly of the mountain. There weren't any other disciples here. Zhang Tai waved his right hand and the multitude tool cauldron landed on a round table in front of him. Following that, he took a look at Yi Xian. Blood. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "What blood?" Zhang Tai was expressionless. "Your blood to nourish the multitude tool cauldron." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "How much do you need?" Zhang Tai's eyes twitched. "Don't worry, I won't take a bucket of your blood. Just a drop. 1 drop." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly and quickly pointed with his finger. A drop of blood shot out from his fingertip and fell steadily into the multitude tool cauldron. Zhang Tai looked at Yi Xian. "Do you want the power of your sword box to become even more terrifying?" Yi Xian said hurriedly, "Of course. The more terrifying, the better." Zhang Tai said indifferently, "You need to set up a sword formation for this sword sheath. Although I know a thing or two about sword formations, I'm not as good as senior brother Gu of the Array Dao Peak. If you can get him to help you set up a formation in this sword sheath, the grade of this sword sheath can reach heaven grade." Array Dao Peak. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "Is Uncle Master Gu easy to talk to?" Zhang Tai was expressionless. "Depends on the person." "Depends on the person." Yi Xian was speechless. Depends on the person. He wasn't familiar with the person at all. How could he be easy to talk to? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Uncle Master Zhang, why don't you help me talk to him?" Zhang Tai refused directly. "No. If you want to go, ask your master to go." With that, he turned to the multitude tool cauldron. "You only have 10 days. If he doesn't come to set up a formation in 10 days, I'll just set up a formation for you." Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian left Weapon Forging Peak. He didn't go to Array Dao Peak but returned to Cloud Sword Peak. After an hour, he made a table full of dishes. Soon, Yuqi walked out. Halfway through the meal, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Uncle Master Zhang Tai promised to help me forge a heaven-grade sword box. However, I need Uncle Master Gu's help to set up a formation." "Master Yuqi suddenly put down her chopsticks and glanced at Yi Xian. "I'm full." With that, she turned and walked into the inner hall. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What does this mean? Is senior brother Gu from Array Dao Summit a demon? Is he that scary? Yi Xian went straight to Array Dao Peak after sweeping up all the dishes. For the sword box. Even if this Array Dao Peak was a tiger's den, Yi Xian had to give it a try. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at Array Dao Peak. Array Dao Peak was deserted and there was basically no one around. No, he didn't see anyone. Something was wrong. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he finally came to the main hall of Array Dao Peak, the Array Dao Hall. In front of the hall, Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Junior seeks to see Uncle Master Gu." No response. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before bowing again. "Seeking to see Uncle Master Gu." At this moment, a voice came from inside the hall. "Come in." A woman? Yi Xian was stunned because the voice was very soft. After hesitating for a moment, Yi Xian walked in. The moment he entered the hall, a pungent aroma assaulted his nostrils. This aroma was too strong. Yi Xian couldn't help but wrinkle his nose. He lifted his head and saw a woman sitting not far away. She wore a white robe that looked like morning clothes. She sat sideways and in front of her was a shelf. On the shelf was a piece of white cloth and she was embroidering something. Beside her was an ice coffin. The entire hall was cold and gloomy. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he walked to a few feet away from the woman and bowed. "Greetings, Uncle Master Gu." The woman didn't speak. Yi Xian was speechless. There was something wrong with this place and this woman. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Uncle Master Gu." The woman still didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. What was this? After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Uncle Master Gu, I am forging a heaven-grade sword case and I need a set of array formation. Uncle Master Zhan of Weapon Forging Peak told me that in our Pale Sword sect, other than him, Uncle Master Gu is the best at Dao array formation. However, he is a little busy, so he hoped that I would come to you to ask for your help in setting up an array formation." The woman suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian also saw the woman's face. There was no emotion on this face, just like a piece of 10,000-year-old ice. Strangers keep away. This was the feeling that Uncle Master Gu gave Yi Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "He is number 1 in array formation?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman said, "Then why did you come to find me?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "But my master said that in terms of Dao array formation, in our Pale Sword sect, no, in the entire Azure Firmament world, Uncle Master Gu is number 1. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Little junior sister really said that? Yi Xian hurriedly said, "It's absolutely true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to find Uncle Master Gu." The woman said, "I'm not free." Not free. Yi Xian's expression froze. He hesitated for a moment before walking to the woman's side. He chuckled. "Uncle Master, my master said that if this sword case doesn't have the support of Master's array formation, it will be a defective item. You can't help me, right? I know how to cook. I will cook for you." The woman stopped. She looked at Yi Xian and stared at him. Yi Xian's scalp went numb from her stare. However, he was thick-skinned and wasn't afraid of being stared at. He immediately said, "Uncle Master Gu, please help me." Get out." The woman suddenly said. Yi Xian sternly said, "No." The woman was slightly stunned. Then, she looked at Yi Xian. "I said get out." Yi Xian was expressionless. "I won't go out." The woman looked at Yi Xian for a long time. In the next moment, she waved her right hand and a wave of sword rays shot out. Boom! Without any suspense, Yi Xian was sent flying out of the hall. But very quickly, he walked back in. Yi Xian sat in the hall. "If Uncle Master Gu is not willing to help, I won't leave." The woman glanced at Yi Xian. She didn't say anything and continued to embroider her things. Yi Xian sat for several hours. When the sky was getting dark, he suddenly turned and ran out. But not long after, he ran back. This time, he brought a table of fragrant dishes. Yi Xian walked in front of the man and smiled. "Uncle Master Gu, it's time for dinner." The woman didn't say anything. Yi Xian held a dish in front of the woman. "Uncle Master Gu, this is fragrant drunken duck. This apprentice nephew has been cooking it for a whole hour. Look at the skin, it's so tender and fresh. Uncle Master Gu, quickly try it." The woman still didn't say anything. Yi Xian was not discouraged. He ate it himself. After eating, Yi Xian didn't leave at night. He slept in the hall. After the woman drove him away, he would sneak back in. In any case, he had already regarded this place as his home. On the third day, Yi Xian held a pot of fish soup in front of the woman. "Uncle Master Gu, try it. The freshly cooked fish is very fresh and tender." The woman didn't say anything. Yi Xian was helpless. He was about to leave when the woman suddenly said, "Wait." Yi Xian was stunned. Then, he quickly brought the pot of fish soup in front of the woman. The woman glanced at the fish soup. Yi Xian quickly handed the chopsticks to the woman. The woman picked up the chopsticks and tasted it. Then, she nodded slightly. "Not bad." Hearing that, Yi Xian was ecstatic. "There's no woman I can't conquer. P.S. Yesterday was Chinese New Year's Eve. I ate instant noodles. The shops in the surrounding hospitals are basically closed. I'm about to throw up from eating noodles. It's the most miserable year. Are there any rules? I'll just freeload for Chinese New Year. Don't worry, I'm not a shameless person. I won't refuse to leave." Chapter 291. Ever since the woman took the first bite, Yi Xian knew that there would be a second bite. As expected, the second time he prepared a meal, the woman took a few more bites. As the saying went, since the woman had started eating, she had not tried to drive Yi Xian away. As the saying went, since the woman started eating, she had not tried to drive him away. As for Yi Xian, he would cook a different meal every day. Although it was not as luxurious as a restaurant, it was very suitable for meals. Just like that, a few more days passed. The time limit for war iron was getting shorter and shorter. However, during this time, Yi Xian did not mention anything about the array. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the time limit for war iron. At noon, after the woman finished eating, Yi Xian was about to leave. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "I'm going out tomorrow. I don't know when I'll be back, so don't come." Yi Xian was stunned, then nodded and smiled, "Okay." After saying that, he packed his things and was about to leave. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "Why didn't you mention the array?" Yi Xian stopped and smiled bitterly. "From the bottom of my heart, I naturally hope that Uncle Master will help me. I am also dissatisfied with Uncle Master. You have been so attentive for so many days, all for the array. However, I won't force it. As long as I work hard, it doesn't matter whether I succeed or not. As long as I don't have any regrets." These were his sincere words. To him, he definitely hoped that the woman would set up an array for him. However, if it was not possible, he would not force it. There were many things in life that did not necessarily go as one wished. However, as long as one worked hard, even if it was fruitless, it did not matter. As long as one did not have any regrets. After saying that, Yi Xian chuckled, "Uncle Master Gu, if you want to eat in the future, you can come to our Cloudy Sword Peak." After saying that, he turned and left. He left in a carefree manner. Inside the hall, the woman was expressionless as she continued to embroider. Yi Xian did not return to Cloudy Sword Peak. Instead, he went to inquire about the current situation. Today, Pale Sword Sect and Realm Defense Alliance were still fighting in the dark. At the foot of the Pale Sword Sect's mountain, coffins were increasing by the day. Not only that, but the Pale Sword Sect's properties in some places had also disappeared without a trace. As for the Pale Sword Sect disciples outside, they were all summoned back. Even the Azure Sword Sect's eldest senior brother, who was the best at fighting, had yet to return. Apart from that, another thing was that the spirit chi in many parts of the divine central continent was gradually disappearing. Although they disappeared very slowly and were all in remote places, they were still discovered by people who were observant. Many forces had already sensed danger. As for the Green Province, it was in a terrible situation, but fortunately, both Great Cloud Empire and Ning Kingdom were safe and sound. That was because the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect hadn't done anything to those two countries. Not only had they not done anything to them, but they had even secretly protected them most of the time. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. As for those cultivators who went to Qingzhou, they didn't dare attack the Ning Kingdom and Great Cloud Empire out of fear of him. As for Mo Yunqi and the others, they were still hiding in the dark and cultivating hard. For Yi Xian, it was fine as long as Qingzhou was safe. However, Yi Xian also knew that it would be increasingly difficult to survive in Qingzhou. Regarding this, he already had a plan in mind. Before long, Yi Xian arrived at the belly of Weapon Forging Peak. He found Zhang Tai and smiled bitterly. Uncle Master Zhang, just make do with whatever escape formation you have. Zhang Tai glanced at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian shrugged. I don't have a choice. Uncle Master Gu is a little busy and can't help. At this moment, a woman walked out from the secret chamber behind Zhang Tai. It was Uncle Master Gu. Seeing the woman, Yi Xian was stunned. The woman walked up to Yi Xian. If you have nothing to do in the future, come to my hall more often. You understand. Saying that, she turned to look at Zhang Tai. You know nothing about the Tao of formations. Having said that, she did not stay and left immediately. Zhang Tai glanced at Yi Xian. What did you say to her? Yi Xian shook his head hurriedly. I didn't say anything. Zhang Tai said angrily, you didn't say anything and she started mocking me? Yi Xian looked very innocent. I don't know either. I really don't know. Zhang Tai glared at Yi Xian. This little Qi is really something. What kind of item did he get? Having said that, he turned and left. Yi Xian, for the remaining time, Yi Xian just waited. Waiting for the heaven-grade sword box to be born. Heaven-grade sword box. If he had a heaven-grade sword box, his flying sword could be put to use again. Heaven-grade sword and heaven-grade sword box. Moreover, it was a heaven-grade superior-grade sword box. Just thinking about it made him excited. Yi Xian sat under a round table, feeling a little bored. As if he thought of something, he suddenly said, "Second floor guru, come out and have a chat." Since the last time he discovered that the Tao Law was a third-floor Tao Law, this second-floor guru had not spoken again. There was no response from the second floor. Yi Xian did not care and said again, "Second-floor guru, tell me, did you do something bad and that's why you're locked up here?" Rumble. Suddenly, the entire second floor shook violently. Yi Xian suddenly felt dizzy and he hurriedly said, "Don't. Let's talk nicely." A moment later, a voice suddenly came from the second floor. "If it wasn't for her, you'd be dead." Mysterious woman. Yi Xian knew that this second-floor guru must be talking about the mysterious woman. Speaking of the mysterious woman, Yi Xian suddenly missed her. All this while, the mysterious woman had helped him too much. This chapter is not finished, please continue. At this moment, the second-floor guru suddenly said, "Look for the Tao Law." Look for the Tao Law. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Look for it." Don't worry, I'll definitely look for the second Tao Law. Now he realized that the Tao Law was even more useful than a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Especially this Space Tao Law. If it wasn't for this Space Tao Law, he would need at least 2 to 3 years to reach the Dharma defensive realm. With this Space Tao Law, he comprehended the power of space in advance and reached the Dharma defensive realm in a short period of time. Of course, he couldn't help devouring those swords. Actually, he still wanted to devour some more. There were so many top-grade swords in the sword catacomb. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Second-floor guru, we've known each other for so long, but I still don't know how to address you." The second floor did not answer. Yi Xian shook his head. This guy was not easy to get along with. I wonder what's locked up on the 9th floor. Yi Xian was suddenly a little curious. He tried to sense the 9th floor, but he could not feel anything. Now, he could only sense the 3rd floor at most. He couldn't even sense the 4th floor. At this moment, the 2nd floor guru suddenly said, "If she doesn't come back, you can wait for death." Wait for death. Wait for death, wait for death. Wait for death. Wait for death. This time, he said, wait for death, dozens of times. Yi Xian snorted coldly and thought to himself, what's there to be afraid of? At most, I'll commit suicide and perish together with this tower. Everyone will be doomed. At this moment, Zhang Tai suddenly walked out. Come in. Yi Xian hurriedly got up and followed Zhang Tai into the secret chamber. As soon as he entered the secret chamber, Yi Xian felt a powerful sword energy. The source of the sword energy was the myriad tool cauldron. Was he going to succeed? Yi Xian was a little excited. Zhang Tai suddenly said, blood. Yi Xian nodded quickly and pointed with his finger. A drop of blood flew out from his fingertip and fell steadily into the myriad tool cauldron. Soon, the myriad tool cauldron shook violently and a sword light flashed out. Yi Xian became even more excited. From this sign, this was definitely a good treasure. After some time, Zhang Tai said again, blood. Yi Xian hurriedly put another drop of blood in. Just like this, after about 2 hours, the entire myriad tool cauldron suddenly shook violently. But the next moment, the myriad tool cauldron calmed down. There was no more movement. Not far away, Zhang Tai was expressionless. Yi Xian was stunned and then said, what does this mean? Zhang Tai said calmly, what does it mean? It means failure. Failure. Yi Xian jumped up. What? Failure? Are you kidding me? Zhang Tai looked provocatively at Yi Xian. If you're not happy, come and hit me. Yi Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 292. Hearing Zhang Tai's words, Yi Xian was relieved. Because he knew it was likely to succeed. Sure enough, Zhang Tai walked to the cauldron of 1,000 tools. He waved his right hand, and the lid of the cauldron flew out. Then, a sword case floated out. The sword case was wide, dark gold in color, and emitted a faint dark gold luster. Simple, grand. This was Yi Xian's feeling. Like. Yi Xian walked to the cauldron of 1,000 tools. Zhang Tai suddenly said, blood. Yi Xian pointed with his finger, and a drop of blood flew into the sword case. The sword case trembled slightly, and soon, he established a connection with it. The sword case flew to Yi Xian, and at this moment, a sword suddenly flew out from the cauldron of 1,000 tools. The sword was 1 finger wide, 4 feet long, and had no hilt, only a blade. Apart from that, the sword was very thin, the thinnest sword Yi Xian had ever seen. This is? Yi Xian looked at Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai said calmly, this flying sword is a set with the sword case. It is also a heaven-class item, but it is only a low-grade heaven-class item. There is also an array inside the sword. When 2 arrays are used together, it is more powerful. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the sword flew into his hand. When he touched the sword, Yi Xian couldn't help but exclaim. Too thin. It was so thin that it seemed weightless. Give it a name. Zhang Tai suddenly said. Name it. Yi Xian nodded quickly, okay. He touched it for a long time, and then said, this sword case is dark gold, let's call it Little Dark. This sword is so thin, let's call it Little Bow. Beside him, Zhang Tai was dumbfounded. Are you serious? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Zhang Tai suddenly became angry, get lost, get lost. Yi Xian chuckled. He walked up to War Iron and said, Martial Uncle, these 2 items were personally forged by you. Of course, you should be the one to name them. War Iron glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said, this sword chest is forged from special dark gold, and it was born in my Azure Sword sect. So, I'll call it Dark Azure. As for this sword, it's thinner than a cicada's wing, almost formless. Let's call it Graceful Swan. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Good, good. Dark Tsang, Jinghong, Uncle Master's name is really good." Zhan Tai said indifferently, "Don't disgrace them." With that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian hurriedly bowed deeply. After War Iron entered the darkroom, Yi Xian turned around and left. Yi Xian returned directly to Cloudsword Peak. At the back of the mountain, Yi Xian stood on the spot with the sword chest on his back. Suddenly, a strand of sword light flew out from the swordsman on his back. In the next moment, a leaf fell slowly from an ancient tree 300 m away. The sword was silent, formless, and traceless. At this moment, Yi Xian was slightly shocked in his heart. The sword chest and flying sword were more than 10 times faster than before. Previously, his flying sword could only threaten a Dharma defensive realm expert, but against a true Dharma defensive realm expert, his flying sword was completely useless. But now, the speed and might of his flying sword was completely capable of threatening a true Dharma realm expert. Even if he didn't launch a sneak attack now, he could still fight a true Dharma realm expert. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian, and the old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Come to Azure Sword Hall." With that, he turned around and vanished. Yi Xian kept his sword and sword chest, and then he headed straight for Azure Sword Hall. Not long later, Yi Xian arrived at the hall. In the hall, he saw two people, and he knew one of them. It was that Nangong from before. The other person was a man, around 21 or 22 years old. The man was about 21 or 22 years old. He wore a long black robe and had a straight back. He held a sword in his hand. Seeing Yi Xian enter, both of them looked at Yi Xian, and Nangong smiled lightly. "Brethren, come, let me introduce you." With that, he gestured to the man beside him, "Senior brother Shang Yu." Yi Xian faced the man called Shang Yu and bowed in a junior brother's greeting. "Greetings, senior brother Shang Yu." Seeing this, Shang Yu glanced at Yi Xian, and then he returned the greeting. "We're all from the same sect, so we should take care of each other in the future. If there's anything, just let me know." Yi Xian smiled, "Definitely." The three of them looked at each other and smiled. Yi Xian was very clearly aware that there was definitely internal strife within the Blue Sword sect, especially amongst the younger generation, and his objective in coming to the Blue Sword sect wasn't for the position of Blue Sword sect master. So to him, if he could get on good terms with others, then he would. He deeply believed that a weirdo like Lan Yu was probably very rare. After the three of them chatted for a while, Chen Beihan suddenly walked in, and when he saw the three of them getting along well, Chen Beihan nodded in his heart, and then he glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of praise in his eyes. It was rare for a young man to be talented, but it was even rarer to have talent and not be arrogant. Chen Beihan glanced at the three of them. "I called the three of you here because I have a mission for the three of you." As he spoke, he sat at the side, and then he continued, "I presume all of you are clearly aware of the matters between my Blue Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance. This time, the three of you will represent my Blue Sword sect on a trip to the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, Heavenly Cord sect, and the Ancient Wu clan." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "For what?" Chen Beihan smiled, "To discuss the matter of forming an alliance with them." Forming an alliance. Yi Xian's group of three were slightly shocked. Forming an alliance was a huge matter, and he was sending the three of them? Chen Beihan didn't say anything, and he just waved his hand. "Go now." Yi Xian's group of three exchanged glances, and then they turned around and left the hall. Outside the hall, Nangong spoke in a solemn voice. "Why send the three of us? Is it just for tempering us?" Shang Yu spoke softly. "If I'm not wrong, besides tempering us, it's also to let the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, Heavenly Cord sect, and the Ancient Wu clan experience the younger generation of our Blue Sword sect." "Why?" Nangong was slightly puzzled. Shang Yu smiled and said, "The most important thing for a sect isn't just its resources and reserves, it needs fresh blood as well. If there's no successor, then no matter how great the sect's resources and reserves are, it's only a matter of time before it falls into decline. The sect master has clearly sent the three of us to show them that our blue sword sect has successors. Nangong and Yi Xian came to an understanding when they heard this. Going out this time, there would definitely be danger, and this danger was the tempering. And this mission was actually to let the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range and the other forces see what the Blue Sword Sect's younger generation was like, because the Blue Sword Sect's foundation didn't need to be seen to know. Not to mention those in the dark, just the 7 sword immortals in the open were sufficient to explain everything. Meanwhile, Shangyu spoke abruptly, the three of us have great responsibilities. Yi Xian and Nangong nodded. If the three of them couldn't satisfy the sect master, then the alliance might not be formed. Shangyu suddenly said, I suggest we split up. Nangong asked, why? Shangyu spoke in a low voice, firstly, it'll be faster, and the three of us can go to 3 different places. Secondly, the three of us are too big of a target, and the Realm Protection Alliance will definitely not let this matter go. When he spoke up to here, he smiled bitterly, even if something happens to one of us, there's still hope for the other two. Yi Xian smiled, Brother Shangyu, don't be pessimistic. There's nothing to be afraid of about the Realm Protection Alliance. Shangyu shook his head, that's because you don't know them well. In short, the Realm Protection Alliance has been able to stand tall in the firmament world for so many years, and that's enough to explain many things. Yi Xian nodded. That was true. Even though he'd met Exalted Lord Lu, he hadn't seen the overall strength of the Realm Protection Alliance. The Realm Protection Alliance was still a mystery to him. Shangyu spoke abruptly, I've been to the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range to temper myself, so I'll go there. What about the two of you? Nangong said, then I'll go to the Heavenly Cord sect, my sister is there, and I'll go there to see her. Yi Xian smiled, then I can only go to the ancient Wu clan. Shangyu spoke in a low voice, Brethren, the ancient Wu clan is quite mysterious and strange, why don't you swap places with me? Yi Xian smiled, it's fine, I have a good temper, and it just so happens that they're strange. Shangyu smiled, then, take care of yourselves, junior brothers. Remember to keep in touch with the sound transmission stone at any time. Today, the three of us will leave the sect together, and we must meet again in the future. With that, he turned around and soared into the sky on his sword. Sword Emperor. Shangyu was also a Sword Emperor. Nangong spoke abruptly, Senior brother Shangyu is thinking for my sake. Yi Xian looked at Nangong, and Nangong smiled, the ancient Wu clan, the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, and the Heavenly Cord sect. Amongst them, the Heavenly Cord sect is slightly weaker, so their requirements will definitely be lower. If I go to the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range or the ancient Wu clan, they won't take a liking to me before I become a Sword Emperor. Yi Xian patted Nangong's shoulder lightly, as a swordsman, your mentality is the most important, and you can't be imbalanced. Senior brother Shangyu's good intentions are more important than anything else. Nangong smiled, that's true. Yi Xian smiled, let's meet again. With that, he turned around and soared into the sky on his sword, and disappeared into the horizon in a few moments. Nangong remained silent for a moment, and he shook his head and sighed, I have to work hard. With that, he soared into the sky and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. After the three of them left, Chen Beihan suddenly walked out. He glanced at the horizon, and no one knew what he was thinking about. At the horizon, Yi Xian was flying swiftly on his sword. At this moment, he was among the clouds, and wherever his sword passed, the clouds were torn apart layer by layer. Flying on a sword between heaven and earth. This had once been his dream, and now it could be considered to have come true. His only regret was that his younger sister wasn't here. If she were here, she would definitely be very happy. Yi Ling. Yi Xian secretly decided that once he was done with his business, he would make a trip to the Mystic Gate. A moment later, Yi Xian collected his thoughts and took out a scroll. The scroll recorded the location of the ancient Wu clan and information about the ancient Wu clan. The ancient Wu clan was a mysterious force. In the divine central continent, some forces were out in the open, such as the Pale Sword sect and the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, while some forces were in the dark. Few people knew about these forces, but that didn't mean they weren't strong. And the ancient Wu clan was very strong. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and looked into the distance. "Come out. I've already discovered you." There was no response. A quarter of an hour later, Yi Xian continued forward on his sword. Every hour, Yi Xian would stop and say something. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian stopped again and clasped his hands behind his back. "Come out. I've already discovered you." At this moment, 2 old men suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian, the one in the lead was Mo Xiu. Mo Xiu glared at Yi Xian. "How did you discover us?" Yi Xian. M. Chapter 293. How did he find out? Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. Could it be that he was just guessing? From the moment he left Pale Sword Sect, he knew that the Realm Defense Alliance wouldn't take this lying down. But he was even more aware that if a true defensive law realm expert was following him, it would be difficult for him to discover that person. Thus, along the way, he would ask the same question every once in a while. He didn't expect that he would actually ask the right question. Mo Xiu. Yi Xian was expressionless. "Your Realm Defense Alliance is really like a lingering ghost that won't go away." Mo Xiu coldly said, "Yi Xian, do you really think that Pale Sword Sect can protect you?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Why don't you find someone who can protect me?" Mo Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Surrender, submit to my Realm Defense Alliance." Yi Xian was stunned. He wanted him to submit to the Realm Defense Alliance. Yi Xian had a stunned expression. "Are you serious?" Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian. "Naturally. With your talent, if you are willing to join my Realm Defense Alliance, my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely treat you well." Yi Xian was silent, seeming to be moved. At this time, Mo Xiu said, "Just you wait, once the price rises to a certain degree, Pale Sword Sect will surely abandon you. At that time, you, Yi Xian, will truly be driven into a corner." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "This matter is of great importance. I need to think about it. Give me a few days to think about it, how about it?" Mo Xiu's eyes narrowed. "You want to delay for time?" Yi Xian smiled. "To tell the truth, I don't really believe in your Realm Defense Alliance, so I need to think about it. Of course, you can act now, but let's see if you can kill me." Mo Xiu coldly sneered, "You're that confident?" Yi Xian spread his hands. "Why don't we try?" Mo Xiu smiled and said, "I'll give it a try." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm towards Yi Xian from afar. In an instant, the space in front of Yi Xian fluctuated, and then a powerful strand of spatial energy swept out from that expanse of space and smashed towards him. The power of space. Yi Xian stood in the air, his right hand suddenly clenched. "Imprison." As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly stabilized. At the same time, the spatial energy that Mo Xiu had released was directly imprisoned by space. However, it didn't vanish, and it was still surging within space. Seeing this scene, Mo Xiu, who was not far away, frowned deeply. Spell defensive state. "No, you can't break through my power of space just by relying on the law defensive realm." Yi Xian said with a straight face, "Actually, I'm at the true Imperial Magic Realm." "Bullshit." Mo Xiu suddenly angrily said, "Yi Xian, do you think that the old man is a fool? The current you is far from the level of the true defensive Dharma realm. The reason you're able to control the energy of space is definitely because of something else." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Yes, I really haven't attained the true Imperial Magic Realm now. However, since I've attained the true Imperial Magic Realm, then am I still far from it?" Mo Xiu's expression gradually became gloomy when he heard this. Yi Xian's speed of improvement was truly too terrifying. The law defensive realm. Presently, he didn't have full confidence in his ability to kill Yi Xian when facing Yi Xian. On the other hand, if Yi Xian attained the true imperial magic realm, then with the terrifying combat strength that Yi Xian possessed, Yi Xian would probably be able to fight him equally. Mo Xiao went silent for a moment before he said, "I'll give you 2 days to consider it." "Yi Xian, you're a smart person, and you ought to know what's best for you." As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them turned around and left. Yi Xian chuckled lightly on the spot, and then he rode his sword and vanished into the horizon. On the other side, an old man by Mo Xiao's side spoke abruptly, "He won't surrender to my Realm Defense Alliance." "This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page." Mo Xiao spoke indifferently, "I know." The old man gazed at Mo Xiao with a puzzled expression, and Mo Xiao spoke in a light voice, "Do you think the three of us can kill him?" The old man spoke in a low voice, "If the Firmament Sword sect doesn't make a move, then the three of us will definitely be able to kill him if we join forces." Mo Xiao spoke indifferently, "Then do you think they won't make a move?" The old man fell silent. Because the Firmament Sword sect would definitely make a move. Mo Xiao's eyes slowly closed. The Exalt Lord should have made a move himself that day. Yi Xian's speed of growth was truly slightly terrifying to him. Especially now that Yi Xian had joined the Firmament Sword sect. The combination of the two was undoubtedly like a tiger that had grown wings. The old man by Mo Xiao's side sighed in a low voice. "That mysterious woman is truly too terrifying. She broke the array that the Exalt Lord had set up in the firmament world with a single sword strike. With such strength, it's normal for the Exalt Lord to be afraid." Mo Xiao shook his head, "If he was afraid, then he shouldn't have made an enemy out of her. This Yi Xian originally didn't have much of a conflict with us, but now we've become sworn enemies. This is truly not a wise move." The old man sighed in a low voice, who would have known that he would be such a monstrous genius? "Now, there's no meaning in saying all this. What we need to do now is to find a way to eliminate this person and the Firmament Sword sect. Now that the Firmament Sword sect has openly provoked my Realm Defense Alliance, if we don't eliminate them, then the prestige of my Realm Defense Alliance in the Firmament world will be completely gone." Firmament Sword sect. Mo Xiao's eyes gradually turned cold, "They're courting death." Finished speaking, the three of them quickly disappeared. Half a day later, Yi Xian arrived in front of a mountain range. The ancient Wu clan was located in the depths of this mountain range. He didn't know much about the ancient Wu clan. However, to be valued by the Firmament Sword sect and be invited to form an alliance, it was definitely not a weak clan. After Yi Xian entered the boundless mountain range, he secretly became vigilant in his heart. This was because he discovered that within this mountain range, there was a lot of poisonous gas. Some of the poisonous gas could be clearly smelled, but some of the poisonous gas were invisible. However, Yi Xian also discovered that even if he didn't use his sword intent to protect his body, he would still be fine. After he inhaled the poisonous gas, it completely disappeared without a trace. Primal Chaos Energy. These poisonous gas were all purified by the Primal Chaos Energy. After discovering this, Yi Xian was wild with joy, because he didn't expect that the Primal Chaos Energy would actually have such an effect. This meant that he, Yi Xian, was immune to 100 poisons. Good stuff. Yi Xian chuckled and continued forward. In a short while, he arrived in the depths of the mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, towering ancient trees stood towering everywhere. These trees were extremely tall, enormous, and like a canopy, they blotted out the sky and covered the sun. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. On the ground, there were things wriggling. Not only on the ground, but there were things wriggling on the surrounding trees as well. Yi Xian's sword eye opened, and in next to no time, he felt a chill run down his spine. The ground in front of him and the surrounding trees were all covered in snakes, a dense mass of small black snakes. At this moment, these snakes were actually staring at him. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I'm Yi Xian, and I've come under the orders of the sect leader to seek an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch." There was no response, but the surrounding poisonous snakes had already started wriggling towards him. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. In the next moment, he opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his palm. Subsequently, a powerful strand of sword intent swept out from within his body. Evil sword intent. The moment the evil sword appeared, the surrounding poisonous snakes all retreated. However, there were still some poisonous snakes that charged towards him. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he raised his sword and slashed. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Hiss. A wave of sword light flashed, and the heads of countless poisonous snakes fell to the ground. Right at this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from the distant dense forest. How dare you! As soon as this voice resounded, a pitch-black vine suddenly shot out from afar, and there was a jet-black poisonous snake coiled around this black vine. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he stabbed out with his sword. Bang! The black vine was instantly sent flying. Meanwhile, a man appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. The man wore a short shirt and black trousers, and there were some strange drawings on his face and exposed skin. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian cupped his fists. Pale Sword Sect's Yi Xian, under the sect leader's order to seek an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch. Pale Sword Sect. The man frowned slightly. You're from the Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian nodded. The man pointed at the black snakes on the ground with their heads cut off. Why did you kill my snakes? Yi Xian said, it wasn't me who wanted to kill your snakes, it was your snakes that wanted to kill me. Bullshit. The man said angrily, it was you who trespassed into my ancient Wu clan, that's why they attacked you. If you didn't trespass into my ancient Wu clan, how could they possibly attack you? Yi Xian said indifferently, brother, when I arrived here, I already sensed that you were hiding in the shadows. So, I took the initiative to announce my identity in the beginning because I hoped that you would come out. Unfortunately, you didn't come out. Not only did you not come out, but you also didn't make these snakes of yours retreat. According to my guess, you intentionally made these snakes attack me. Unfortunately, you underestimated my strength, right? The man's expression instantly became slightly unsightly when he heard this, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. All I know is that not only did you trespass into my ancient Wu clan, but you also killed my snakes. You deserve death, you. Just at this moment, the man's voice stopped abruptly because a sword was already pressed against his forehead. The anger in the man's eyes had already turned into terror. Yi Xian turned his head to the right. What? Is this how the ancient Wu clan treats its guests? Soon, an old man walked out from there, and the old man glanced at Yi Xian. Your Excellency attacked as soon as you arrived at the ancient Wu clan. No matter how I look at it, you don't seem like a guest. Yi Xian put away his sword and said with a smile, I attacked for his own good. The old man said indifferently, really? How is it for his own good? Tell me about it. Yi Xian said with a smile, in the outside world, the strong are respected. I think your Excellency should be clear about this. As for this brother, he clearly knows that he can't defeat me, but he still provoked me again and again. To be honest, if he goes out, with his character, I'm afraid that he won't live for more than a few days. What do you think? In front of Yi Xian, the man said angrily, do you think you are? At this moment, Yi Xian's sword once again pressed against the man's forehead, and the man's voice stopped abruptly again. Yi Xian faced the man, do you see how weak you are? If I want to kill you, I can do it easily. It doesn't matter if you are weak, because as long as you work hard, anyone can go from weak to strong. However, if you are weak and still want to be arrogant, then you are stupid. The man stared at Yi Xian and sneered, do you dare to kill me? You don't dare. You. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed out with his sword. Chi. The man's forehead was instantly pierced by Yi Xian's sword. The man's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Yi Xian smiled slightly, I dare to, really? I'm not lying to you. P.S. Brothers, for the sake that I've been working late these days, give me a monthly ticket. Every ticket is love. End of this chapter. Chapter 294. It wasn't just the man's eyes that were filled with disbelief, even the nearby old man had an expression of shock. Obviously, he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually kill him. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You actually dared to kill him? Yi Xian smiled. He thought I didn't dare. I just wanted to prove that I dare. The old man's expression was rather savage. This is the ancient Wu clan, not your firmament sword sect. Yi Xian smiled. I've already given him 2 chances. Unfortunately, he didn't cherish it. Since it's like that, then let him die. As for you, if you're dissatisfied, then attack. As he spoke, a formidable aura suddenly swept out from his body. The Sword Emperor's aura. The old man's expression instantly changed when he saw this Sword Emperor's aura. He gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. You're actually the Sword Emperor. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. Notify him that Yi Xian represents the Firmament Sword sect to request an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch. The old man's expression was rather unsightly. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly turned cold. What are you waiting for? The old man glanced deeply at Yi Xian before he turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian faced the man on the ground who was still breathing, and the man was staring resentfully at him. Yi Xian smiled. Do you think the ancient Wu clan will take revenge for you? No, they won't. Because they don't dare. How arrogant. Needless to say, Yi Xian really was arrogant enough. But this time, he'd intentionally acted so arrogantly. Of course, the reason he'd killed the man was because the man had aroused killing intent towards him when he'd accidentally entered this place for the first time. Just as he'd said, the man had noticed him the first time he'd come here, but the man hadn't stopped those venomous snakes. Obviously, the man wanted to use him to feed those venomous snakes. Unfortunately, the man had misjudged Qin Shi's strength. For the sake of the Gu Wu clan, he gave the man 2 chances. However, the man thought that he was afraid. Some people were like this. If you took a step back, they wouldn't think that you were being magnanimous. Instead, they would think that you were afraid of them. Then, they would become even more insatiable. No matter how many of such people there were, Yi Xian, would kill them all. I'm giving you convenience, but you can't treat it as anything. Very soon, the old man from before walked over again. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, the patriarch wants to see you. Yi Xian nodded. Please lead the way. The old man glanced at the man's corpse on the ground. The man's aura was getting weaker and weaker. He slowly raised his hand towards the old man as if he wanted to say something. The old man sighed in a low voice. You should maintain due respect for the strong. After that, he led Yi Xian into the depths of the dense forest in the distance. On the spot, the man's eyes were wide open. He had really died with a grievance. Under the old man's lead, Yi Xian entered a small village. Unlike ordinary villages, the houses here were built on ancient trees with a long history. On both sides of the village, there were some stalls. Besides miscellaneous goods, there were also some rare treasures. Yi Xian even saw a heaven-grade treasure. It was a little strange. The old man led Yi Xian to a treehouse. This treehouse was very big, much bigger than the other treehouses. Moreover, on the roof of the treehouse, there was a pair of huge horns and some mysterious runes. In front of the treehouse, the old man bowed deeply to the treehouse. Patriarch, he's here. A voice sounded from inside the treehouse. Come in. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Outside the treehouse, the old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked in. The interior of the treehouse was very simple. There were only a few tree chairs and a wooden table. And in front of him stood a woman. From her appearance, she looked very young. She wore a skirt made of leaves that only reached her knees. Below her knees was a pair of jade-white thighs, and in her hand was a wooden staff. And the woman's aura was deep like the sea. An expert. This was Yi Xian's first impression. The woman sized up Yi Xian. In the next moment, a powerful pressure suddenly pressed down on Yi Xian. In an instant, Yi Xian's body felt like it was being pressed down by a mountain. Bang! A powerful imperial sword aura suddenly swept out from his body. This imperial sword aura forcefully blocked the woman's pressure. But in next to no time, the woman took a step forward. As her step descended, the pressure she emitted instantly multiplied. Kacha! In an instant, the bones in Yi Xian's body started to make cracking sounds. And Yi Xian's legs actually started to slowly bend as if he was about to kneel down. The imperial sword aura could not block it. Yi Xian's expression was quite ferocious. In the next moment, he suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, bang. A powerful force suddenly emanated from his body, and this force, coupled with his sword emperor's aura, actually forcefully blocked the pressure that the woman had released. Earth force. Facing such an expert, Yi Xian did not dare to hide his strength. He directly released the earth force. In front of Yi Xian, the woman glanced at Yi Xian, imperial sword aura, and this earth force. You are that Yi Xian who was wanted by the Realm Protection Alliance. Yi Xian nodded, that's me. The woman walked in front of Yi Xian. She looked straight at Yi Xian, you killed a member of my ancient Wu clan. Yi Xian said seriously, heaven and earth can bear witness. He was the one who attacked first. The woman looked straight at Yi Xian, do you think I don't dare to kill you? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, forgive me for asking, but is the ancient Wu clan stronger or the Realm Protection Alliance stronger? The woman's lips curled up, you want to tell me that if the Realm Protection Alliance doesn't dare to kill you, how could my ancient Wu clan dare? Yi Xian shook his head, Patriarch misunderstands. I came to the ancient Wu clan this time without any malicious intent. As for that clansman of yours, I have already let him off twice. Unfortunately, he did not cherish it. If Patriarch takes this matter to heart, then I can't do anything about it. The woman sat down on a wooden stool. She stared at Yi Xian, go back and tell Chen Beihan that with this alliance, my ancient Wu clan has no way of forming an alliance with your Blue Sword sect. Yi Xian nodded, all right. Saying that, he turned around and left. The woman was stunned. This fellow didn't care at all? He, Yi Xian, naturally didn't care. It wasn't that he didn't care about the Blue Sword sect, but he was very clear that whether or not these two great influences would form an alliance wasn't something a disciple like him could decide. The reason he came here, just as Shang Yu said, was to let the ancient Wu clan see the strength of the Blue Sword sect's younger generation. That was all. As for whether or not the alliance was formed, that was something for the Blue Sword sect patriarch to worry about. Yi Xian left decisively. He directly exited the treehouse and was about to fly away on his flying sword. But at this time, the ancient Wu clan patriarch suddenly said, do you know what kind of situation your Blue Sword sect is in right now? Yi Xian stopped and shook his head, I'm not too sure. Ancient, this chapter has yet to end, please continue to the next page. The Wu clan patriarch coldly sneered, everyone is watching your Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protection Alliance, waiting to see who wins and who loses. But what you don't know is that there are already many forces standing on the side of the Realm Protection Alliance. Yi Xian shook his head, I'm just an ordinary disciple. These are all matters that my Blue Sword sect patriarch should worry about. Even if Senior told me, it would be useless. The ancient Wu clan patriarch coldly sneered, because of your momentary stubbornness, my ancient Wu clan has decided not to form an alliance with your Blue Sword sect. Do you know what this means to your Blue Sword sect? Yi Xian sighed in a low voice, Patriarch, forgive me for being blunt. Whether to form an alliance or not, I'm afraid you have already made your decision. Am I right? The woman looked at Yi Xian but didn't say anything. Yi Xian continued, on the surface, the Realm Protection Alliance is indeed stronger than my Blue Sword sect, But how many people in the Blue Firmament world trust the Realm Protection Alliance? In order to achieve their goal, the Realm Protection Alliance didn't hesitate to sacrifice Blue Water Province and Azure Province. Do you know how many lives there are in these two provinces? However, in the eyes of the Realm Protection Alliance, these lives are truly worthless. Forming an alliance with them will not end well for you. The woman said indifferently, then my ancient Wu clan can just sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Yi Xian smiled, the Realm Protection Alliance is happy to see you like this. Because once they deal with a few of the more difficult to deal with, the rest of you will be easy for them to need. At that time, if your ancient Wu clan wishes to find someone to form an alliance with, you will find to your despair that there is no one left to contact. When he spoke up to hear, he turned to face the woman. Presently, there are many remote places in the Central Divine Prefecture where the spirit energy is starting to dry up. Even an idiot would know that this is the doing of the Realm Protection Alliance. If the Realm Protection Alliance really wishes to destroy the Central Divine Prefecture, then what will your ancient Wu clan do? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. You don't have to worry about that. It was a beautiful woman. Obviously, she was a member of the ancient Wu clan as well. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, my ancient Wu clan has always stood aloof from the world. Our presence here doesn't harm the interests of the Realm Protection Alliance, so they won't act against us. Yi Xian smiled and said, if you think standing aloof from the world is a good thing, then I can't do anything about it. However, I have to say one more thing. In the current world, if one doesn't possess formidable strength or doesn't have formidable allies, then standing aloof from the world is simply waiting for death. To be honest, my ancient Wu clan isn't strong to the point that no one dares to offend you. The beautiful woman sneered, will forming an alliance with your Blue Sword sect bring good results? If your Blue Sword sect is defeated, then wouldn't my ancient Wu clan be buried with your Blue Sword sect? Yi Xian nodded. You're right. If my Blue Sword sect is defeated, then our allies will definitely be finished as well. However, doing great things naturally comes with risks. But what if we win? The beautiful woman still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian shook his head and said, this matter is between you and my Blue Sword sect master. I, Yi Xian, am just an ordinary disciple. I've already arrived at the ancient Wu clan and conveyed my sect's purpose to you. My mission has been completed. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Finishing his words, he directly walked out of the treehouse and rode on his sword, disappearing into the horizon in a short while. Inside the treehouse, the beautiful woman was about to speak when both of them suddenly looked outside the treehouse at the same time. In the distant horizon, a sword light was flying towards them. The person who had just left was none other than Yi Xian. He's back again? Both of their brows furrowed. Yi Xian landed in front of the treehouse, and then he walked into the treehouse. He bowed slightly to the two. I was impolite just now. Please don't blame me. And I think we can continue to chat. The two women. End of chapter. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.